Yeah, we'll see.
How are you? Good to see you, Sheriff.
You said it was your
It's been set up.
Yes, sir. Sorry, I kind of asked me about the.
Morning, it. Oh, here comes Derek. You're saying I'm just Sheriff.
We'd say,
It has to be a business. To call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. And I'd like to begin by asking Will, Supervisor Warren, to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Will. Thank you. Also, I'd like to ask you folks kindly to please mute or turn off your cell phones. Boy, we have a crowd today. Okay, we will begin with call to the public. Anyone that would like to come to call to the public, you have 3 minutes to speak and state your name and your title, please.
Good morning, gentlemen. Joanne Cathcart Lawrence from the Greenlee County Assessor's Office. I am here on behalf of the Greenlee County Chamber of Commerce, and I'm just reminding everybody of our annual event on April 26th. It is going to be a Mexican fiesta, and we do have a surprise gift. Oh, I'm going.
That's what you sound like.
it was so important, we had to get to hear it twice.
What?
Technology is wonderful when it works.
Technology. Anyways, we have a special guest who will be there that evening, as you know, Ron. And so very excited about that. And so we welcome everybody. Tickets are available. You can also buy a table. What we are trying to do is we're trying to do 2 scholarships. One for Duncan High School and one for Morenci High School for a student that is going into business. So very excited about that from the chamber's side. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, Jojo. Okay, anybody else?
Yes, I'm Dennis Cook. This is on behalf of a rezoning of some property next to our homes. And I have a neighbor that couldn't attend because he had a heart doctor appointment today he couldn't get out of. And he had some concerns. He lives right next to this property, parcel 510-02-8A. His main concerns were where the water and the sewer are gonna come from and the size of the lots. And I can leave this letter with anybody if needed to. His name is John White. We both all have concerns with the water and the sewer being in our area because it's a tight deal, especially with the amount of wells getting drilled right now and with the drought we face. And that's what we'd like for the board to consider when they make these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You can, yeah.
Derek, can I ask you a question of Hayden? Is that what agenda item that one is speaking of? Is that F? On the
The consent agenda, let me see up there, yes,
number F? Okay, that, I just wanted to make it number F. Letter.
yes.
Anyway, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
So I just want to mention something. Sir, you can leave that letter with Hayden, please.
I did
Oh,
already.
got it.
Okay.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
you're welcome. Okay, next.
Morning, gentlemen. My name's Gabriel Guerrero. I'm with Greenlee County Sheriff's Department. I'm a lieutenant. And I'm here to present our newest new hire. He's going to be an investigator for us. He comes with a lot of experience and knowledge and is actually born and raised in this community.
Awesome.
His name is
Good.
Hector Iglesias.
Hector
Okay.
Iglesias.
Well,
Okay.
welcome aboard.
Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay,
Welcome.
and thank you for bringing him in and introducing him to us.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you, Hector.
Yeah.
He is
I
from
I didn't
Missouri.
recognize him either. Good deal. Anybody else? For good news?
Or not, but that's okay.
Okay, then we'll move into our next item of business. We'll move into Public Health Service District. The Board of Supervisors will convene as the Board of Directors of the Greenlee County Public Health Service District and will reconvene as the Board of Supervisors following consideration of following this item consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda. It's listed.
I second that motion.
Motion has been made in second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Ayes have it, unanimous. Okay, we'll now reconvene as the Board of Supervisors and move into our next item of business, the Flood Control District. The Board of Supervisors will convene as the Board of Directors of the Greenlee County Flood Control District and will reconvene as the Board of Supervisors following the consideration of this following item, consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda. It's listed.
I second that motion.
Motion has been made in second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, ayes have it, so ordered. Okay, we'll now reconvene as the Board of Supervisors and we will move into our next item of business. Sherry Elkins, Regional Director of Graham and Greenlee Region for the First Things First. And she will have a discussion and action regarding a request of support in recognizing the importance of early childhood development proclamation declaring the week of April 5th through the 11th as Week of Young Child in the Graham and Greenlee counties. Sherry, the floor is yours.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. As he said, my name is Sherry Elkins and I'm the Regional Director for First Things First in the Graham Greenlee region. And if you're not aware, First Things First is the early childhood agency of the state, and we put grants out for early childhood programs. We're funded through a tobacco tax, and the good news is smoking is going down. The bad news is that means our funding's going down, but we're looking at other avenues. We're hoping to add the vaping tax to that so we can continue serving the young children of our region. We are very fortunate to have three of our volunteer council members from Greenlee County. We have Sabrina Dumas from the library. We have Sarah Camacho as our parent representative, and we have Jess Messick from FMI. So we appreciate them very much. And as Chair Gomez said, I'm here hoping that you'll join me in recognizing this week as Week of the Young Child. As we recognize the importance of early childhood development. High quality early childhood experiences lay the foundation for lifelong success, benefiting not only children and families, but also the broader community through improved educational outcomes and economic growth. This proclamation will help raise awareness about the critical role early learning plays in strengthening communities and shaping young children's futures. I also have a children's book for each of you with a challenge to find a young child to read it to. And you can either give that book to them or you can find another one and keep passing it on. Inside is also a Graham Greenlee resource guide. It's specific to families that have young children. We're in the process of updating it. So if you see something that's missing that you think would be good on here, we'd love to hear that. And then we can also, when we get the new ones printed, bring you some to hand out here. So I'm hoping you'll sign the proclamation. Then if it's possible, if I could get a picture with you, and please Sabrina will join us. They're collecting those around the state along with the proclamations.
Okay, absolutely. Anybody have any
Should we read?
questions or
proclamation?
concerns? Yes, we could. I'm not signed into it.
Well, I'll read it. I just wanted to read through the proclamation.
Thank
if that's
you.
Okay, so the proclamation for Week of the Young Child. Whereas all of Arizona's children deserve access to quality early care and education environments, and whereas quality child care programs build children's lifelong learning skills during the critical years from birth to age 5, and whereas ECE teachers and childcare providers are the essential workforce that helps Arizona parents get to work and school, and whereas funding quality childcare is a smart investment that improves family well-being, strengthens communities, and grows our state's prosperity. And whereas First Things First, Arizona Association for the Education of Young Children, Southern Arizona Association for the Education of Young Children, and other community organizations in conjunction with the National Association for the Education of Young Children are celebrating the 54th anniversary of the Week of the Young Child. And whereas these organizations are working to improve equitable early childhood opportunities that provide a strong start for children in the Graham Greenlee region. And whereas public policies that support ECE for Arizona's youngest learners help our families, communities, and the economy thrive. And so now, therefore, we, the Greenlee Board of Supervisors, do hereby proclaim April 5th through the 11th, 2025 as the Week of the Young Child in the Graham Greenlee region, and encourage all citizens to support and invest in early care and education in our community. So with that, it's so moved that we pass this proclamation.
I'd like to second that.
Motion has been made in second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, so ordered.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Appreciate it.
You want to
Take
picture
that
up here
picture.
with this?
Sure.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now move into our next item of business. Derek Rapier, County Administrator, discussion and information presentation from Seago Economic Development Program regarding development opportunities and consideration of state land near the Y. Floor is yours, Derek.
Thank you. I will be brief and mostly by way of introduction. You'd have to be Rip Van Winkle or living under a rock to not know that we've been talking about housing in the county for some time. Recently, Supervisor Warren attended a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce meeting where Kevin Fowler from the Southeastern Arizona Government Organization, SEGO, presented information on housing development in the region. And I got in contact with him and asked if he would tailor some of that information to inform the board on some of the things that we need to be thinking about. He's got some handouts that I will provide to the board. But it's broad. It's a lot of things that we need to think about, and I appreciate the thoroughness of his presentation. And so with that, Kevin, if you'd take the floor and.
Thank you. Thank you to Supervisor Gomez, the board, Mr. Lopez, staff, and the public for joining us today. I am the Economic Development Manager for SEGO. I'm also the Capital Project Planner, and I have a background in economic development planning for over 30 years. And I am constrained by time. I have a meeting in Bisbee on an affordable housing project. And so there's a lot of information here, but I'll make it brief. And the board has copies of my comments as well. And so what we're looking at is obviously not only in Greenlee County, but in Arizona, we have a dire housing situation. We have housing shortage. We have a housing affordability problem. Currently in America, 94% of the public can't afford to spend $400,000 for a house. So housing is job one. Affordable housing doesn't do any good to build housing that people can't afford. And, you know, in this particular area, we have workforce housing issue. We have latest numbers over 1,000 people on the waiting list at the mine for housing. And so my job, starting with my interview with SEGO forward, has been zeroed in on housing, affordable housing. How can we help these 4 county regions that SEGO partners with in finding ways to do some affordable housing projects? As Derek mentioned, there is some land nearby that is in the State Land Trust that I have been doing some research on. And dealing with state land is kind of a time-consuming, difficult process. I'll get to that in a minute. I want to talk about some information about a project, how we could do a project, what it involves. I think some initial planning has been going on by the staff. Job one is water. Water is an issue. We just ran into a roadblock on a 26-unit affordable housing project in Bisbee with the Arizona Department of Water Resources. And so this area is not in an active management area. However, it requires approval by the state, and on something like this, the Department of Real Estate. How do we deal with ADWR? Well, they say what's required in this area is a certificate of adequate supply or inadequate supply. Not many lenders are going to want to provide a mortgage on an area that has an inadequate supply approved. We need to go for the approved supply of adequate water, not the 100-year certificate that they require in an active management area. But Still need to deal with ADWR on the water. That's kind of a key issue. I understand from conversations with Derek that the county has been working with a hydrologist. I also have a hydrologist I've been working with that's currently involved in a 4,000 unit development in Arizona. He's been in the hydrology and development for decades. And so when we deal with the Department of Water Resources, we are going to need to have adequate consultant, support, such as a couple hydrologists. So I did reach out through the consultant to do some research on water availability from existing water providers in the area here near this proposed or considered development. We're still in the feasibility stage of this. Loma Linda, Vertile, their current well capacity won't support an expansion if we wanted to approach them about that for this kind of a development. We're going to have our own water supply freestanding through a well. And and I suspect their obligation as a public utility is to their existing users, making sure they have adequate supply to supply them for water. So what we're looking at Sego is a multi-use planned area development on these properties, which would provide a semi-autonomous area with lodging, hotel, possible RV park, various densities of housing, mini storage, other activities so that people aren't driving far away to get basic necessities taken care of. And like any development, you want to do it in phases. The reason you do the phases is prices go up. You don't want to get locked into prices that aren't sustainable. We've been dealing with a issue of how is the supply chain working and how are prices. So we do a phasing project, and that's also better for a small community to start. Let's do a proof of concept. Here's what we're proposing. Let's do a phase one. Let's see how it sells, how fast it sells. Are we, how are our costs? What are the input that we get from buyers in the community on this project? What do they like, what they don't like, so we can incorporate those changes into the future aspect of the development. And so we also have a couple partners on my team. I deal with a realtor and a surveyor, and I've kind of put together some people that work on these kind of projects because that's something that we anticipate will be, going on into the future in this area. So let's talk about funding. Funding is always an issue, and right now reliance on federal funding is probably not something that is going to be a source of revenue we want to rely on. There is an entity in Arizona that's funded by the state, which is the Greater Arizona Development Authority, GATA. And they are very interested in working with Greenlee County in helping to make a project like this a reality. GATA basically does mostly lending, but what they do is initially they'll give you $100,000 planning grant, which could be used to determine, okay, what do we need? How are we going to do that? They prefer to fund through a public entity. In other words, if XYZ development wants to do something, there isn't any money available. If we were to create a development authority for this project, then we can get infrastructure paid for by them to start with. And that's one of the expensive parts of any process like this: wastewater and water. And so there's also grant funding if you are a public entity, which is not available if you're a private entity, of course. And there certainly is Freeport, who, this will obviously assist them in their housing situation. So I would consider them to, be a possible partner. things we need to look at for a new project like this is roadways. How do we take care of that? The infrastructure part of it. And we're gonna go back to regulatory, Department of Real Estate, Department of Water Resources, our county partners, Seago, anybody that has any say in the process. The State Land Department, for example, I have a handout that you'll receive later that after some lengthy conversations with the Arizona Land Department, which they'd indicated they'd passed some previous discussions with the county. They are anxious to work with the county, but they're constrained by constitutional and Arizona administrative code restrictions as to highest and best revenue for schools. They're charged with any land that's sold under the state trust has to be put out to bid and has to get the best price that they can get for it, because they're a steward of the public money for the schools. So, any land through them is going to have to go through a process. And it takes 18 to 24 months for that process to kind of work its way through. In the handout that I gave to Derek, it kind of goes through the process, what you have to do, how long each step takes. There is a $2,000 application fee to kind of get it running. And I did bring a map with me that Derek's office was happy enough or luckily sent to me. So we have a basic initial parcel, and then we have some other parcels. And my thought process and proposal is that we start with the smallest piece of the puzzle, which is a 154-acre piece, and consider applying for the balance of the property that the county has discussed possible interest in at the same time, because the process is so lengthy. So we'll kind of link them, but not link them, because funding on this 150 acre parcel is continuing on an appraisal done by the State Land Department through their approved appraisal process. And they're indicating that it could be from 1,000 to 5,000 an acre. So if we were fortunate enough to say get that initial parcel, that's going to be an expenditure by the county in the area of $750,000 to purchase the land. But there is some other components required with state land, like compliance with the AAA, which is the Arizona Antiquities Act, surveys, dealing with water resources again. And so the process takes quite a while, and initiating it, like I said, it's only going to be $2,000. So that's not a heavy lift, but I've given you information that's a kind of a budget outline. And I'm certainly willing to have a conversation with board. I think that, Derek and I and Mr. Griffin probably need to talk about, there's some legal issues that we need to discuss, probably best done in an executive session at some point, so we can talk frankly about the legal components of this, because anything like this is going to have some legal issues, and we need to make sure the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, that we're in compliance with any laws and statutes, that we are making decisions that are good business decisions, sound business practice for the citizens of this county. And so a couple other issues on this property is water. Besides water is power and wastewater. Normally on a development like this, you would do a package wastewater plant, which is a plant that is designed for the site. It treats the effluent. It treats the effluent at the highest level possible so it can do recharge. So recharge means that we could recharge the water table 80 to 90% of the water that we draw, which is it's considered a reasonable use doctrine, which the attorneys over here are probably somewhat familiar with. And so we have to show that the water we're using is reasonably used, And we're doing all the methods we can to conserve water and use water efficiently. That would include recharge. That would include gray water systems. That would include water catchment systems. That would include low water flow devices. Xeriscape landscaping. Pretty much the standard practices, you know, best practices, if you will, about how we conserve and use water. And we have some partners in the area that at some point we'll probably need to have a little consult with about what we're proposing. Do you have any considerations on the project? How can we get you to be part of the planning process and take your input into anything that we're going to do, so that, you know, we don't want to run into a situation of litigation over a project. And there's some local partners. There's also a group in Arizona that could be an issue as far as litigation on a project of this size. So we need to try to come up with a plan to forestall that possibility if we can, which certainly is, you know, the legal part of it is a definite consideration. What I'm proposing on this project is a commercial development first, which would include things like a gas station, hotel, motel for housing for workers and temporarily and workers on the site, food court, storage units, RV park. That's always a good way. When in Winslow, we have a project there that's 600 employees from the Corps of Engineers is coming into town to do a levee expansion project. Well, that takes up every single hotel room in Winslow. So I propose let's do 2 RV parks and at least get some of those people to have housing that they can, you know, pull along with them, fifth wheel RV, and, you know, still be able to have lodging available for tourists. It's a tourist-based economy up there also. So I think that's probably important as part of the commercial aspect of, you know, this property. Then the residential areas, you know, standard, I don't have any city planners here or county planners, but you do commercial zone. Behind that, you do a higher density housing, which could be an apartment complex. Then farther away from that, you would do a medium type density like condos, townhomes, something like that. Then you would get back to a phase of single family residential. And part of that is the noise factor. Part of that is just kind of backing away from the high density, high noise, high traffic areas and getting back farther away for the single family homes, which would probably be the most expensive aspect of the development. You know, I'm always looking at affordable housing, even in this project. And I think that we should look at different mixes of use. There's a couple, you know, different housing options. There's the boxable option, which some of you might be familiar with. There's also modular housing. You can get a 900 square foot modular home, which is a factory built home, but it's got drywall and siding and connections for solar and things like that. And you can get a 900 square foot house delivered from the factory for under $100,000. So that's getting in the realm of being affordable. You know, Greeley County is a little more affordable than, say, Cochise, where the average home is about $387,000. And we just, you know, that's just too expensive for a lot of people to afford. And we need to have workforce housing that is for, you know, I've spent a lot of time talking to some of the miners that come here. A lot of them own homes in other places. And they're getting, you know, they're staying at hotels. So, you know, this could possibly be considered transitional housing for the form of Arizona Department of Housing funding. And, you know, they may or may not be interested in buying a house or not, but they would certainly be interested in an apartment. They would certainly be interested in an RV space. So trying to kind of address the use, also the move up people that live in the area that say, hey, I'd like to get a new house. I want to try this new subdivision. It's new and nice. And my home's, you know, 80 years old. how do we accommodate those buyers and try to get the broadest range of appeal that we can to the workforce and the residents in the community to assure that we, are able to, have these units be sold as quickly as we possibly can and work towards the next phase of development. This is a huge project. I mentioned this at my last meeting, which is, this takes a lot of time and preparation. I think Derek and I had a great conversation about this, that, it's very important to get this right in the beginning and not repeat steps, not make mistakes, not waste time. Because I know Supervisor Warren was at our meeting and he said, we needed to, make something happen. And I completely agree. I think most of the residents would say they agree with that. I'm sure Freeport would agree also, is, how can we, as quickly and affordably as possible, make something like this happen in Greenlee County. State Land is a great partner. They just really are sold on trying to help this county do something within the constraints of the law. And I've spent some time, many conversations with them, and we forwarded the maps that staff was nice enough to give me. And so we could do this. The process would be, I proposed in the document that Derek's going to give you, it's titled Greenlee Board Budget Issues, and it talks about deposit for the land, other funds that would need to be expended, like a hydrologist and some, couple consultants to make sure that, let's just make sure that this is going to work like we want it to. We can afford to do this project, that the community will support the project, and that we're spending their money wisely and we're making a good investment in this community, which I think everybody wants to do. And in my document that Derek also has a copy of, it's titled Copper Canyon Development. I just threw that name in there to have a document to save in my computer so I could keep going back to it. And I have like 200 documents in my file. So that's a name Kevin just made up to kind of take the character of the area into consideration. It's pretty lengthy and detailed, as Derek indicated, and it goes into all of the things I'm talking about. It talks into how this community could be more or less self-supportive. And, there's some insurance requirements that are in the county's best interest to ensure that we're not risking public funds without having an insurer to backstop us first. Okay. And so, how does a community like this govern itself? Village of Oak Creek, for example, they built a community similar to what's being proposed and considered, and they did an HOA to manage the activities of the community, create some rules and regulations, and it's in the county. So it's not, doesn't have, there's been a couple of votes on incorporating, they didn't want it. It's still run by an HOA, which is, the homeowners association will have meetings with the residents and say, here's what we're thinking, here's some rules that protect us all, give us a form of governance and redress in the event of issues and problems, and kind of make sure that the community is quality. And I'm proposing that we engage with other partners, such as possibly Greenlee County, Freeport, the San Carlos Tribe, private landowners, citizens, etc., to come up with a consensus plan on how we're going to do this. What do you like, not like, incorporate those into the process so that we have consensus. And this is America, so consensus is a little challenging at times, but I think we can work towards getting that done if we're, involving parties right at the get-go of this process and letting them know that we want their input, we need their input, we appreciate it, and we want to make good decisions. We want their help doing that. Let's see. Derek, I'm keeping track of time here.
We're good.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to switch over. This is the document that is got a lot of good information for the board right here. Got another document here that is the budget issues, and I'll just kind of go through that quickly, which is, you know, the appraisal process, the state land department, you know, obviously nothing happens if we don't have land to do it on. And, you know, state land department can't play favorites to anybody. As much as they like Greenlee County, they still have to do a fair bidding process. The initial step of the process is us having a meeting with them, preferably an in-person meeting. I to ask them if they'd be willing to come down here and meet with us, since everybody is pretty much in this area. They said they would. And we will talk about here, you know, maybe walk the property. Here's what we'd like to do. You know, we'd like to start with the initial identified smaller parcel and, you know, possibly apply for the second one to make sure that, you know, it's kind of all running contiguously, because it takes, you know, they said it might take less than 24 months, but we're constrained by the archaeologist that's doing the Antiquities Act assessment for one. And we're also constrained by ADWR approval for the water. So we have to really work closely with them, which state land department said they would be willing to help us deal with ADWR. So since they're another state agency, I'm thinking they may have a little better rapport and ability to convince them to helping us. But, you know, I can't stress too lightly that, you know, ADWR is going to be the one agency we're going to need to work with. And, you know, couple quick highlights here is state land will give you a 50-year right-of-way on the property. And which of course would need to be, you know, renegotiated at some point. And I don't think any of us in the room will probably be around then. But other professionals that we'll need would be a planner, an architect, surveyor, realtor, some just to do an initial feasibility study. I'm proposing a feasibility study in this just to make sure, okay, let's look at everything real close before we spend any serious money that might not necessarily preclude us from putting a $2,000 deposit with the state land and getting the process moving, since it's so time consuming. But we need to really look at all the numbers. You know, what are these properties could they sell for, the different properties, what, you know, what kind of rental income is available, what, you know, are we going to offer any kind of property tax incentives? If we bring a developer in, we're going to give you a 5-year incentive where, you know, we're giving you an abatement on property tax. Now, what inducements can we provide? Because we're not, I mean, pretty much every entity in Arizona is providing something to a developer that comes in and does something in some form or fashion. That one's one that there's nothing there now, so you're not taking money away that you had, and it kind of is phased in at some point where you will get revenue and you'll get somebody to come into, you know, the area down here is a little challenging because we're not close to anything. So we have to induce people to come here, and that's one of the best ways, most standard practices for attracting developer. And you know, the state land department will do the appraisal, then they have to go to the commission, then we have a board of appeals, which is almost 2 months. Auction can take up to 4 months. They say the cultural report's 30 to 45 days. I've done those a couple times for municipalities, and it took more like 90 days. And it just depends on the availability of the consultants and, you know, et cetera. You have to get 3 bids, and then you submit them to the state land department. They give you an approved list of vendors, then they approve the bid. We would be responsible for paying for that. So we obviously want to contact some providers and see where we can get a good price from the pre-approved consultant that the state agrees with. And what's required is a phase 1 ESA, class 3 cultural assessment and survey, and an approved ALTA survey. So it's a little bit of a process. They do it all the time, and the prices vary. I've identified in my report 3 vendors out of Tucson, which will be the most cost effective for us to utilize somebody Tucson as opposed to coming from Phoenix or somewhere like that. Most of the suppliers that state land identifies are out of the Phoenix area, which is, you know, that's just gonna make, we're gonna pay for travel time, which is not constructive use of time, if we can avoid that. And then we have things like document preparation, which, you know, has to go through staff attorney, possibly AG, other, you know, there's a process to everything. And, but total, we're looking at 18 to 24 months. The $2,000 deposit's non-refundable, important to note. But, you know, I think considering the magnitude of the project, that's not a deal killer. If it was 200,000, then we might all go, oh, wait, yeah, this is not gonna, you know, we can't do this. We can't risk that. But $2,000, I think, is a reasonable deposit. I mentioned a development authority. We might want to say, hey, let's get Clifton to partner with us. Let's get XYZ to partner with us. Let's get some governmental partners to create a development authority, which I'll get to the legal aspect in a minute. Then we can get GATA money, federal money, Department of Housing money. We can get money because we're a governmental agency, and private developers usually don't get grants or any kind of state funding. You know, I think we probably have fine attorneys in the county, but the magnitude of this project to me dictates that we retain counsel that does development agreements, does development work, and has Pierce Coleman, which I know Derek is familiar with. They did the development agreement for the city of Glendale with Cardinal Stadium. So, you know, that's kind of project is a huge undertaking. And I've talked to one of the partners with them, which I've had a long time relationship with Colonel Palladini for over 20 years. And he said he'd love to work with us, help us come up with the pieces we need to make good decisions, protect the interests of the city and the taxpayers, and make sure that, you know, we are, you know, doing what is basically standard practice in the development agreement realm. How, you know, things are going to be paid, who's responsible, you know, those different kind of aspects of any kind of development. This was a small project of, you know, 40 acres or something, maybe, or less. That wouldn't require that we look at some of these other, you know, more outside council kind of options. And Bisbee uses Pierce Coleman. They develop, I think they represent 30 or 40 municipalities, towns throughout the state of Arizona. And they have a water law expert, Mr. Brown, who we used in Winslow, who would be great to be part of the team, because we're going to have to deal with ADWR. And so we need a water law attorney expert to facilitate that. And I will just tell you briefly that, how am I on time, Derek?
Finish up. We're
Okay,
good.
okay.
I'm sure they'll have a few questions.
Okay,
so.
I've been meeting with partners such as Bisbee and Douglas about, you know, what is ADWR telling you? I got 5 different stories from ADWR, by the way. Can't do this. You're in that. You're not in that. You're in an A, you're not. We, you know, and so those entities, Douglas and Bisbee, are saying, you know, I think we need to find a way to deal with ADWR. Because we're basically in a situation where we have land we can't develop. The attorneys are familiar with something like an inverse condemnation. You have land, but administratively you can't develop it. And some of the rule making that they're doing could be outside the scope of their authority. So we really need an expert on water law, because besides getting the land, we need to be able to have water to develop the land. That's like issue at the top of my list of paperwork I've given you. And Colonel Palladini said they're willing to have a Zoom meeting, Teams meeting with the players to discuss, you know, here's what we would do, here's how we could do it, here's what it might cost to do it. My experience with them is the prices vary widely depending on, you know, how things are going to work, the size of the agreement, things like that. But I think the attorneys would agree that that's a critical step to protecting everybody's interest, is having experts in the law that we need. And you know, they're busy doing things that they do every day in the day-to-day management of the county. You know, they're doing you know, civil actions, they're doing prosecutions. Taking on something like this, you could bring in an attorney, but it's better to have a firm that has 30 or 40 attorneys and is an expert, because if we got sued by an unnamed environmental entity, we need to have somebody big enough to repel them and make them give pause for thought if they have an environmental concern about our project. So I think that's enough for now. Did you have some questions, sir?
Mr. Chairman, I have a few, but this is your floor.
I have one question based on ADWR and the water.
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that there's that there is one water company out in Loma Linda and Verde Lee? Have you shared that with him?
There's two.
No, there's one.
The consolidated ownership.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes, I
Yeah,
know.
and they've issued us a letter of intent for water to that area. So does ADWR, since there's established water company there already?
Here's what they're gonna say. They need to have 100-year certificate of supply on file with us if they're a water utility provider. And I know that because this property in Bisbee has Arizona water right to the property line. And they said, well, you can't use Arizona water. And I said, well, why is that? And they said, well, Arizona water doesn't have an approved certificate of supply. Now, that was the cheapest, best alternative, water line right to the property line, right? Arizona Water came to the property, said they weren't aware of that, which I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. But yeah, it depends on the status of the water company. And when we check the well capacity of the water company, we meaning the hydrology, said I'm not sure they'll be able to support a build out of 600 acres. So, you know, that's, you know, it'd be great if they could do that, but I haven't had any discussions with them because I haven't been authorized to do that. I just thought, you know, I would make this presentation. That would be ideal if we could do that. And then when I talked to ADWR, which I do on a regular basis, said, hey, does this company have a certificate of supply? And, you know, there is a problem in New Benson right now. ADWR will not renew their certificate of supply. And ADWR says, well, we need a mapping and we won't accept a private hydrologist. We want to do our own mapping, so we're not going to renew your certificate of supply. They've been saying that for 5 years. Okay, so there's, you know, I had their attorney on the phone with us and with the city of Bisbee, and we're getting a lot of different stories from them. So I'm kind of not going to say anything bad about one of our state partners, but I'm going to say they're a challenge to deal with, and everybody that's dealing with them is saying the same thing. And Benson, it should be a slam dunk to get your certificate renewed, and it's not.
Okay, well, there's more for discussion on
Okay.
that subject.
Okay,
That we'll educate
Okay.
you on with
Okay.
this locally.
okay.
Yeah,
Thank you,
okay.
sir.
sure, Kevin.
Appreciate it, Chairman.
Sure, Kevin, I'm not sure. I have a couple of questions, but I kind of want to formulate them and go through the information because that was a lot said. and
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
information here. Do we have your contact information or can you?
We do,
share?
yes.
Okay.
And
You
all the
can share that
documents,
with us.
I've
Yeah.
given you one of the documents he's referenced, and we'll make sure that I've got all the other documents he's referenced, and I'll supply those to the board.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
You're
I'll follow
welcome.
up.
Anybody else?
You have a question?
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Sure.
You indicated that the development of Bisbee you're working with is in low income housing
Yes.
or affordable housing.
Yes.
Have you worked with nonprofits on those, or is that something City of Bisbee's doing?
Yeah, the city of, well, Seago, of course, has worked with, you know, we're a nonprofit ourselves.
Correct.
Yeah, so we.
I think like Chicanos por la Casa, there's other groups that do this kind of
Uh,
work.
no, we haven't been working with Chicanos por la Casa specifically. I mentioned in my proposal, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is a partner. We have some partners in our wheelhouse already. Everybody's kind of in a holding pattern as far as that particular project because of the federal funding. It's all passing through, and we've had some issues. That's all I'll say. I'll not liberty to say, right? And so this project was going to be done in partnership with a private investor, City of Bisbee, and Seago. And I've done private-public partnerships because we had an individual live in Bisbee that said, hey, I'll help you guys do this. And they had significant means to do that. And once we did our due diligence and I started digging around, I'm like, well, this water is going to be a problem. Let me start there. And I've never been able to get over that. We didn't put a bid in on the property because of that. There has been a bid put in that Bisbee's considering whether they're going to take or not, but there's concerns whether the developer from California is actually going to do affordable housing or not. And, you know, we nonprofit, you know, Bisbee basically nonprofit, we had homes for under 200,000, which is, that's by definition, affordable housing. So we're open to working with anybody, but most of the Seago's partners are federally funded as well. And so I've been focusing on private funding through private grants, private investors, state funding.
One of the other questions is, because as you can tell, we've worked through a lot of the issues. You've raised some issues that we haven't fully explored. But there seems to be three phases to something like the development we've been talking about. One is preparation and acquisition, which would be the archaeological studies, the surveys and so forth. And it seems as though, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the use of a housing development authority, getting in some of these experts, that would be the time to employ those folks when we're thinking about the process from the get-go?
Yeah, because I think we want to determine density.
Okay.
And then we propose we have this unit, this unit, this unit, this number of units. Then we go to the realtor type and say, okay, how much will this unit sell for? How much will this unit sell for? How much does an RV space rent for, which is $500 to $800 a month? How much is a rental? So, you know, some of it's going to be transitional housing in the form of what is the going rental rate? So we can come up with some kind of an initial cash flow analysis, budget expenditure money. So yeah, before we're on the hook for 750,000, I think we need to do our due diligence with these professionals that do this all the time. The surveyor and planner, we need to see, okay, how much of this land is developable? Do we have any floodplain, floodway issues? Do we have, you know, expansive soils, for example? Do we have radon? We have to look into all those things to determine what we can do, how much we can do, and how much that's going to generate. Make sure that it funds itself.
And would this type of inquiry take place during the state land acquisition, that 18 to 24 month
Yes,
ballpark window?
that's what I'm proposing, because it makes
Okay.
sense before you spend 750
To buy it?
yeah, to get some consultants on board. And, you know, part of this feasibility study that I gave you a draft of, and also in my budget, there's a couple like initial people, right? But there's other people that aren't included in there that we would need to have a discussion about. Okay, we got to get these other people too on board to say, okay, here's our experience with developments like this, you know, and meaning Pierce Coleman. And the hydrologist is doing a 4,000 acre development, so he's a great resource. I know you have one also, but you know, I've been using another person that I wanted to find somebody that had done 1,000 or more units, because there's a whole other kind of thing that goes with that kind of density and that kind of quantity of development.
So with that, I know that when you go through the state land process, there's some cost, for example, the cost of doing historical or archaeological surveys, those kind of things. If whoever wins the bid pays those back to the person who submits the application, would these other costs, like the attorneys and the hydrologists and so forth, from your experience, are those reimbursable? So let's say the county works this process up to the point of auction and somebody else steps in and buys. Are those sunk costs to the county if those development related, you know, resources?
I don't think that the attorney cost is going to be reimbursable. I'm not sure some of the due diligence process that's put in the statute would be like, you know, they would say use ADWR for the water, but we know that we need our own consultant and a realtor. We're not going to be reimbursed from that. I do have a plan to make sure that we get the bid, but I can't discuss that in the public meeting. That'll have to be an executive session idea, and that's pursuant to conversations with the state land department. I bless you. How can we, are we allowed to do this, this, and this? Okay, because if we're gonna expend this money, we need to get the property, right? And I did one of these things with Bisbee. I proposed one of these and they're like, oh, wow, great idea. Nobody's thought of that. So there is a way, and I think I'm gonna visit with you two and them and make that we can assure. Now, of course, it's a bid, it's never assured. I think that there's always the chance of an entity. I don't think they do like Zillow and put it on a nationwide search, so we could get some developers in Arizona, right? But because, being in the business a long time, this is not an easy place to say, hey, I live in Phoenix, I want to do this development. Yeah, it's, it might be somebody out of Tucson. But what I think my plan that I'm proposing is probably going to work with them after talking with them about it. We just need to fine tune the legality. How can this, are you acceptable with the numbers that we need to do? Because once you get into a certain point, you have to get your hands on the land. I mean, you just have to be creative and make sure we get our hands on the property. And I think state land has said over and over, like 4 times now, we want to work with Greenlee County. We would really like to see this project happen. We've had meetings with them. We like them. We like you. Let's work together. I told them I was having a meeting with y'all. And I said, I will circle back to you and kind of have a visit with you. And I said, we'll still need to have another meeting before we can decide if we're going to go through with the application process and provide a deposit. I said, but I'm pretty certain initially that because they've talked to you for a couple of years or whatever about this, that's probably a process that will at least initially be undertaken. And they asked about the feasibility study. I said, I'm working, I've got a draft outline for it. I said, we need to punch in numbers so they can say, okay, well, let's spend a little money making sure, just again, that we're making a good decision. And
just to chime in.
Yeah, of course.
My understanding through state land, because I've talked to them so many times also, is anything pertaining to the process that with them, with whom and we end up paying for all those items that survey and architectural and environmental and all that. That's all. If we're outbidded at the down at the courthouse, that's all those items pertaining to state land are what are reimbursed, but all the other items I think are on our own.
Yeah, I think you're right. If it's required by statute, it's reimbursable. And if it's something else we do to assess the feasibility, I think we eat those costs.
Right.
So from what I see, there's the preparation and acquisitions phase, there's the development stage, which is the roads and the water infrastructure and packet plants and wastewater. And then there's the build out phase, which and part of the question the county we've been trying to grapple with is how much do we spend, if any, in each of those 3 phases beyond what's required by statute. So and then the question of whether or not the county actually becomes the acquired owner of the property is another question.
I think we talked to Palladini and get advice from them on what do you recommend and follow their recommendation to be on solid legal ground. That's and I think them, you agree they're good counsel.
Yeah, no, they've been involved in municipal council for a long time. So in any event, that's all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate the thoroughness of what you've presented. So
I'd just like to add that I think if we were to say, well, what do we do next? Because if I'm sitting up there, I've been a mediator for decades, so I always want to do what that's called a role reversal. I'm up there, what questions do I have? What's the next phase? Well, I think the next phase would be talk about feasibility study, which I've provided some information on that. And then let's have a talk with a Zoom meeting with state land, start with them. Then maybe have a Zoom meeting with no charge with Pierce Coleman. Then go to, okay, Pierce Coleman, water law expert, ADWR, okay? Get those 3 people in play as quick as we can. Then we can move on to, okay, we're going to put a deposit on this. What are we going to do next? There's people that if Seago did the feasibility study, we would need to pay some people to do some work. You know, they've got to drive up here, they're requiring time. I'm getting free work out of the hydrologist right now, but he wants to be paid. It's indicated in the document that I gave to Derek also.
Maybe also have a conversation with the local water company.
Yeah, local water company. And then, you know, if it looks like we want to do it, then let's meet with some of other local partners.
Yeah.
Let's meet with the mine, let's meet with the tribe, let's meet with Clifton, let's, you know, see who could be on our, you know, team and how they would participate, what they expect in return and.
Sure.
What would be the reason for interfacing with the tribe?
The reason is that after having a meeting with Freeport McMahon, I see how closely they work with the tribe for the water that they receive passes through San Carlos land, for one. Let me put this delicately. There is some litigation that has in the past and is ongoing related to water issues in the tribe, for one. The other one is after having the meeting with Freeport, I think that it's a wise idea to be respectful to the tribe and see if, okay, are you going to be okay with this development? Do you have any objections? Here's how we're going to, and even though they'll say this is not in the San Pedro, it's not, we still, I think, having dealt with the Navajo Nation for 40 years, I think it's just a respectful thing to do and show them that, you know, we want your input, and it may not be a statutory requirement. I think it's just a doing the right thing requirement. And part of that is forestalling this unnamed environmental entity. Because if we get the tribe to say, give us a letter of support, unnamed environmental entity will probably be less likely to want to sue us because they're already counsel for the tribe. So I'm trying to play all of the cards in the deck and make sure that we're not going to get some surprise where we get served with some paperwork because we didn't do anything wrong, but we weren't respectful and didn't reach out to somebody that may or may not be directly impacted, but they're also on the Seago board. So, yeah.
Okay.
Well, for your information, Kevin, I don't mean to interrupt you, but my experience with the tribe is I tried that.
Yeah.
They never would go to the
And-
table. They never would, but you've been in this arena forever and ever, but they wouldn't return calls on another piece of property we were looking at
Right.
initially. And I mean, I even drove down, met with their attorneys and we'll get back to you. Never heard from them, went down unannounced and because they wouldn't call me and then had another conversation with them after I got there and we'll call you back. We'll tell you what our plans are. Never heard from them.
And my thought process, Chairman, is if that happens, we tried.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I agree. I
We
totally
made
agree.
the effort.
That's how I was looking at it.
Questions? You're good?
Any other
You good?
questions, anybody?
No, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Appreciate it. Nice
A
visiting. with
lot of
y'all.
information. We're gonna be talking
All
more.
right, thank you, Mike.
Have a safe trip to Bisbee.
Okay, thank
Yeah, safe travels.
you. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I make a suggestion in terms of those who are here in attendance. It appears that many are here with respect to the consent agenda.
Okay,
And with respect to item F in particular, if there are those who are in opposition of the proposal on the consent agenda, it may require that we push that decision back to another meeting. In fact, the chairman could inquire of our audience members if they wish to comment on items on the consent agenda, specifically the planning and zoning area.
okay.
That might move us forward and allow these people to go home sometime before, we're all done.
Is there anyone out there that wants to make a comment on any of those items on that consent agenda?
And specifically what one?
Well, I mean, in order to do that, we'll have to do it a little bit more formally, but.
Yeah, you'll have to come up to the podium and state your name and.
So the property, this is Les Billingsley, I'm Dennis Cook, and we live around the property that's gonna get developed. We also live next to the fairgrounds that just drilled a well, and I understand is gonna drill an additional well. And then these people come in, and if they drill a well, I don't know what all the property that living on both sides of the highway there is gonna do to us. We just listened to a man for a long time talk about water. We have fairground water that comes to the city and they charge the heck out of the county. And I see why they want to drill a well. It's expensive. I like the fairgrounds. This is what I'm a part of. I want it watered down and I don't want it dusty because I live across the ditch from it. And so does Les. So we have a lot of things that are going on, but I do not want us to lose all our water. And what happens places like Wilcox, a rich guy comes in, drills a well, and every other farmer goes bankrupt, and because they don't got no water, and he's the richest guy, now he can't even drill a well, Wilcox. And I know water's always been a deal because of the mine and everything, but these are their concerns about all that's going on in our little town of Duncan.
Plus, there's a water drainage that the state is actually the ones that caused it. It comes right through my property, and they caused it from the Carlisle Road to go to my property by cutting the county, cutting the drainage into my side. But I'm not really concerned about that part. The part I am concerned about is the water drainage now goes down the side of the highway going to the east and then crosses into that same property they're talking about. And when it comes to cloudburst, it's a big problem. There's a lot of water runs into that land, right?
Yes.
So,
Mr. Chairman, can I say something?
Go ahead.
So basically, there's two different ways that we can get rezonings through. One is to have a hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission and then a hearing with the Board of Supervisors. There has to be notice to do that kind of a hearing.
Right.
The other way is to do the hearing with the Planning and Zoning and then to do consent agenda with the Board of Supervisors. In order to do consent agenda with the Board of Supervisors, there has to be no objection. If an objection is raised to not having a hearing at this stage, then the board should take it off the consent agenda and then go through the notice requirements and have a public hearing. This is basically public hearing type stuff we're hearing from them. And this is consent agenda is not the arena for that sort of thing.
Right. Okay.
We were just told to give our concerns and
Concern.
come here.
Okay.
well, one other thing on what was just, the guy just talked about all these problems. There's many problems, but I'm 82 years old and been in this valley most all that time. And like the hydrology, they want the hydrologist they sent down from the state spent over $100,000 for the school out there and would not listen to anybody. He called it an aquifer. It is not. Every driller in this country has said it's streams, and they've proved it because you can drill one well here, nothing. Drill a well over there, you have something. But he got him 10 gallons a minute and he wouldn't listen to anybody, $100,000. So, I want this all taken in consideration that a lot of these rules and regulations and everything that we're getting into worse all the time through the state and everything else. I know because I've permitted 2 different mines and I know what that's all about in New Mexico. It's worse over there, but you can do it without all of the crap. That's all I gotta say.
All right. So what do you suggest in regards to these items?
Can I
that-
read what the statute basically says? And then this will be up to you, but, so this is in, 11.
Thank you, sir.
11-814E. And it says, if the commission or hearing officer has held a public hearing, which is at the Planning and Zoning Commission, the board may adopt the recommendations of the commission or hearing officer through use of a consent calendar without holding a second public hearing if there is no objection, request for public hearing, or other protest. So in order to do it today, a consent agenda, you would, as the board, and it's kind of your decision as to whether you consider this a protest. But if you do, then you need to say, we can't do it on the consent agenda. It needs to be done in a public hearing. And the public hearing is with you guys at a board meeting, but you have to follow proper public
Post it,
notice.
right?
You have
Yeah.
to Post it in the newspaper. Everybody that wants to get up and complain can get up and complain and discuss with the board what their concerns are. But that would have to be done through another public hearing. It couldn't, you can't have that at a consent agenda. So if you feel that today you've heard enough that it rises to the level of objection, request for a public hearing, or a protest, then we can't do it on the consent agenda.
And you're pertaining to D, E, and F? Are they all 3 of them that are on here?
This is F. This is
Just F?
Let's
Okay,
take-
And the
Just-
RU 36 rural minimum lot, 36 acres.
okay, the F, so we can scratch that and approve the consent agenda if I feel or we feel that this is in lieu of a protest, so we
Yes.
just scratch that.
If you feel
off
that this
the-
is a protest, then that would be appropriate action.
So
take.
procedurally, someone would move to take item F off the consent agenda,
Right.
then move to approve the remainder of the consent agenda, and then direct the staff to place item F on a subsequent meeting with proper notice for a public hearing before the board.
Okay, I need a motion here. As presented.
I won't say that presented, because they get mad at me. Well,
So I'd like to make that motion.
Go ahead.
But you're
You
gonna
can
have
do
to-
it in three motions would be cleanest. To remove item F from the consent agenda would be the first one.
I would,
I'd like to make that motion to remove item F from the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion has been made in second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's off
The
unanimously.
second, not necessarily motion, but directive to staff and the P and Z staff would be to set this for a subsequent public hearing at a Board of Supervisors meeting, most likely the first meeting in May, because that'll satisfy the notice requirements.
Watch this, Will.
Go ahead.
So moved.
Second that.
Motion has been made and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. So ordered.
Okay.
It's on you, Hayden. Thank you.
And then you can take this in whatever order you wish, but you could now move to approve the remainder of the consent agenda now or as it comes up on the agenda.
I move to, since we're on this agenda item, I move that we approve the remainder of the consent agenda as posted.
And I second that motion.
Motion has been made and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Unanimous. Okay. So ordered. Thank you very much. Thank you, gents.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move into our next item of business. Tony Hines, Public Works Manager, Fleet Discussion and Action to consider awarding upfit bids for the two Tahoes in the sheriff's office. Tony, floor is yours.
Morning, Tony Hines, Fleet Manager. We went out to bid to upfit the two Tahoes that we currently have waiting for the upfitting. I recommend that we do Arizona Emergency Products at $32,313.58 each vehicle. So that's what we're looking for.
Anybody have any questions or concerns?
Did you say, I'm sorry. You
Go
said
ahead.
32,313 per vehicle?
Per vehicle, yes.
And the agenda the financial impact just says 32,313.58.
Yeah, when I put each on there, it goes away when you print it.
Oh, it runs out of.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do we?
What is the total financial impact of both upfittings?
64, 616, 617, 16.
Did you give the board backup information with that total amount?
No, it's the bid came in individually. So you double that for the two vehicles. So the bid only shows the 32,313.
Times two vehicles.
Correct.
Which is in line, really, with past,
That's
past
what
upfitting.
I think we approved
Right.
that 2 meetings ago, didn't we?
The approval to go out to
To
bid,
go out
yes.
for bid.
to bid.
And these numbers are not inconsistent with other upfitting costs we've recently incurred.
So my question is, because the agenda information form only shows the financial impact of $32,313.58, can we continue to approve this motion for $64,626 or $27?
I believe you can, and here's why.
Okay.
The agenda information form is our administrative way of keeping track of the agenda. It does not limit what can be decided. So the agenda item itself says discussion action to consider awarding upfit bids for two Tahoes.
Right.
The agenda item information form talks about the cost for one, but you have the authority under it's been properly noticed as two upfits, the
Okay,
cost of which is 32,000 and change.
that's the reason I asked. Question, I have another question.
Go ahead.
Tony, was this a singular, similar scope of work or something sent out to all of these bidders that identified exactly what we were looking for?
Yes, as the same as what I do for a vehicle, I do it pretty general. And then they'll do their packages together, and as long as it meets the bid requirements, they'll go through.
And so all three of these met the bid requirements?
Yes,
And the one that we're suggesting is just the lowest of those three bids?
correct. And we've used Arizona Emergency Products before,
Yeah,
so we're familiar with their work.
okay.
So you have used them before and their work is.
Good, very good. Yeah. They're easy to work with. They don't give us any issues.
Well, with all that has been said, I entertain for a motion. Thank you, Tony.
Well, I move that we approve of the award of the upfit for the two sheriff's office Tahoes in the amount not to exceed $64,627.16 as presented.
I second that motion.
Motion has been made in second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, ayes have it unanimous.
Thank you.
Order. Thank you, Tony. Okay. Oh, Matt, where's Matt at? Are you gonna be Matt?
I will be Matt.
Okay, our next item of business, Matt Bollinger. In lieu of Derek, Emergency Manager, discussion and action regarding consideration to initiate emergency fire restrictions within the unincorporated areas of Greenlee County, the Apache Sitgraves National Forest implemented stage one, the restrictions on February 28, 2025. Floor is yours, Derek.
Very good. We saw this just 4 weeks ago when we first presented in March. It'd been dry. Literally that week, we got rain and some snow in the mountains. Interestingly, as we visited with our colleagues up in the White Mountains, they said, yeah, we got about an inch and it was gone, and by the wind the next day, it blew it all away. Since then, there's been a few storms, but the Apache Sitgraves and all of the forests have never pulled out of stage one fire restriction, which is our trigger. So our recommendation to the board is you adopt our local fire restrictions. We'll get it out on our Facebook. We'll get it out on all the channels we try to do so that people will be aware. There's been a little bit of moisture this week, and there may be some moisture coming, but none of it looks significant enough to put a dent in the drought conditions that are there. So with that, the staff's recommendation is that the board adopt the local fire restrictions as we typically do.
And there've been two fires up in Alpine in the last little bit. Yesterday, I was in conversations with Alpine Fire District on something else, and they're like, well, sorry, we're off to another fire. So.
And those two threatened houses, they caused
Oh,
evacuations in the Alpine Village East area.
Yeah, so it's coming. It's so dry up there, so. But with that, I will move to initiate the emergency fire restrictions within the unincorporated areas of Greenlee County as presented, or as of stage one fire restrictions as of February 28th, 2025.
Second that motion.
Motion has been made in second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, ayes have it, so ordered. Okay, item B, discussion and action regarding cooperative agreement between Greenlee County and the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management.
So by way of brief history, go back to the Rodeo Chetasky fire, which is over 20 years ago now. There was no framework in place to get multi-agency response to that fire. And so as you recall, one of those started on the White Mountain Apache Reservation. The other one started on forest land outside the reservation. They merged, caused all kinds of damage in the Heber area. In response to that, there was a statewide memorandum of understanding that put into place a framework where when a catastrophic fire begins to happen, primary agencies on that can then reach out to other agencies, cities, counties, whatever, to request equipment or personnel to assist in the emergency management. The agreement before you is somewhat of a addendum. It's not an addendum to the agreement, but it's essentially a second part to it. And that is that if we end up sending equipment to aid in a fire, then we could then apply for and be eligible for some reimbursement through the Arizona Department of Forest and Fire Management. So that if we send our bulldozer or our road crew to help push a line in the forest, then there's a possibility of some reimbursement. Whereas before, what happened was we would go through the process and then the originating county or jurisdiction would start a FEMA or DEMA request. And then our request would go in under that. So it was a much longer process. This would be a bit more direct process. There's not a financial commitment on our part, and we're not required to send our bulldozer or personnel or anything else. But if we have equipment available, if something like this happens, we can do that. Then we can do that. But it also allows, if it begins in our county, that we can put out that request to other jurisdictions. Okay, let me make sure I've got that. Matt, was that an adequate description of this agreement?
Yes, sir, that is. It gives us a vehicle to be able to be reimbursed to the state.
It's a reimbursement agreement.
Do we have, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ron.
Do we just give action or do we have to approve that?
This has,
Yeah, discussion action.
yeah, discussion.
Yes,
and
no,
action.
we would approve
Yeah,
the
approve it.
agreement. If the event came up, then we would work through our emergency manager, Matt Bollinger. If necessary, we would call an emergency meeting, or if it was within his authority, in terms of cost and so forth, then we would approve and send that. This just sets up the framework for reimbursement, not the decision of whether to send or not to send, the equipment and personnel.
Okay,
I entertain for motion.
well, I move that we approve, oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, I move that we approve the cooperative agreement between Greenlee County and the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management as presented.
I second that motion.
Motion has been made in second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, ayes have it, so ordered. Okay, we will now move into our next item of business. Derek Rapier, County Administrator, will go on A, discussion and direction, possible action to review state land grazing lease in Franklin area and to consider renewal and or retention of the permit. And this is an action item also. Go ahead, Derek.
Might I make a suggestion? Right now, we don't have the ability to broadcast in the room. I believe it would broadcast on YouTube. In order to try and correct that, we would have to come off the YouTube feed and go back on. Might I suggest we take a break and give our IT folks a chance to reset that? For those of you who may be watching on YouTube, please stay tuned. It should go live again after a few minutes. We need the ability it'll help these discussions as well as our budget discussion later if we have access to display capabilities.
Okay, well, we are now on a break. Back in order, and we're on item A that Derek is.
Are we back up on YouTube as well,
Yes.
Jesse? Okay. Then let me. Oh, Graceland's. All right. Let me find myself here on the. I'm not sure I ever. Again.
Oh, this is impossible action, direction, or possible.
Yeah, I'm not sure we want to, I want to introduce the topic to you. Here we go.
We probably don't need to make a motion that we. Just let it lie.
Had to remind you that I got a EAC advisory committee meeting today, Thursday. Thursday evening, the one that. Oh, at the social club, and they have another guest speaker there.
She's the mayor of,
Douglas, oh, this,
across the border.
what's that?
Agua Prieta.
Agua Prieta, yeah. And council, whatever, yeah.
Anxious to see what she has to say.
Okay, up on your screens is a map. Almost 40 years ago, although it may have been, I've seen, Kate tells me almost 40 years ago. I've seen some documents suggest it was almost 30 years ago. There was an effort to try and attract an industrial reclamation industrial site. In the process of pursuing that opportunity or trying to pursue that opportunity, some land became available in the Franklin area. It's a 40-acre area. On the map in front of you, it's the darkest area. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, probably not, but it's the darkest area right in the middle. It says Greenlee County. I apologize, it's upside down, but it'll help orient you somewhat. That 40 acres of private land is bordered to the south and southwest by a yellow piece that is owned by the Donaldson family. There's a little blue piece of private land just to the west of that is owned by the Dixon family. And then there's the slightly less dark, a slightly lighter area of pink that is a state grazing lease. To orient you, if you leave Duncan on your way to Lordsburg, you're going straight, you go through Franklin, past the Franklin store, and then the road takes a long kind of curve off towards New Mexico, just before the old way station. Right at the corner of that curve, off about 300 yards from the highway, is where the county land sits, that 40 acres. We own that outright. We have owned, in conjunction with that land, we have held a grazing lease to the larger parcel. I believe it is 6 or 8 AMUs, which is animal monthly unit. That's usually measured as a cow-calf pair. It could be a horse. Horses measure more than cows and so forth. We have never run cattle on it. We've never been cowboys in that sense. We have subleased the grazing lease to a variety of people. It is currently subleased to one of our employees. As near as we can tell, the lease, the last lease we signed was a 10-year lease going from 2014 to 2024. I asked Kate Calder and just simply said, why did we acquire a lease? We're not in the cattle business. And at the time, the thought process was that the lease would give somewhat of a buffer to other landowners from this industrial reclamation park, which never really got off the ground. It never really got off the concept stage. The truth is, and I don't know what the legal landscape was back 30, 40 years ago, but the landscape now is that grazing lease wouldn't necessarily provide any buffer. It also does not give us first in line status to acquire that property if we wanted to. We would go through the same type of process we're talking about at the Y or the landfill or anyplace else, and we'd go through an application process, just like any other piece of land. In terms of, and there can be simultaneous applications, by the way. We entertained a call just about a year ago now from a company that was looking to do a solar project in the area. And they were asking whether or not we would object to them filing an application for a solar project that would overlay our grazing lease. At the time, we tell them, go ahead. I mean, we won't stand in the way. I don't think anything's come of that. But every once in a while, we get inquiries like that. Increasingly, I've asked myself, why does the county own a grazing lease that we don't use? It does require some administrative effort on our part to renew it, to report on it. We have to turn in at least one, if not two reports a year on how many animals on it. We go then to the sublessee and say, how many animals you got on it right now? And depending on conditions, it could be 0 to 6 or 8. It is difficult to see how the lease provides any value. The land itself is situated, the railroad runs right through it. And then there's great big wash drainage that runs right through it. So the land itself may have value, and the intended original use of some sort of an industrial park may make a lot of sense. It's more difficult to make the arguments of why we continue to have the grazing lease. If the grazing lease, if we did not continue it, it would then be available to somebody else to lease. And they would go through the regular process, whether that's a grazing lease or whether it was a solar lease or whether that was a conservation lease, whatever it may be. We can access, well, we can't quite access our property from the highway without going through someone else. So we would go through the Donaldson property. The red dotted line there on the map shows Highway 70 heading southeast into New Mexico. It eventually ends up in Lordsburg. And so we do not access the land through the state grazing lease, but even if we did, that's a separate easement or access and egress easement through state land. We don't need to make a decision today, but my question for you is, do we want to continue to have that grazing lease? Because I believe right now our current lease has expired. I don't believe we've renewed it. So we could work with state land to let them know. We would also want to work with our sublessee and say, look, we're going to let this go if the board decides to let it go.
I have a question, Derek. So we own the property and we have a grazing lease on it? Is that what you're just mentioning? Or we don't even own the property?
We own the property.
Yeah.
So that
The
40 acres, that darker square, we own it outright.
Right.
That's held in what we call fee simple name of Greenlee County. We own it.
Okay.
The lighter, larger pink area is a grazing lease. Grazing leases typically have to be tied to a piece of land that is owned.
Oh.
And so not necessarily a physical connection, but they have to have an in-holding that it's tied to.
So it's only there because we own that 40 acres that's tied to it.
Correct. And we only own it because the person we purchased it from owned the grazing lease in the 40 acres before. He wanted to get out of the ranch. So he says, if you buy my 40, I want you to take the grazing lease with it. And so we've had it for all these years. And
so do we sublease to the individual that's grazing there? That's what we do. What do we charge him?
We charge exactly what we're charged. It's a pass-through.
To have that lease.
Yeah, we don't charge them for our administrative headache, but we charge them.
Yeah.
Whatever the AMU per cow charges, we charge the sublessee the same amount.
What is that even?
The cost?
Yeah. 470, 480, something like that. It's pretty minimal.
$480.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the whole lease.
And one of our employees.
That's
Yes,
we
we
have to do the administration on that.
We put it out, and he was the only one who asked, and he took over after his father passed away.
Okay.
Who had it for many years before then. Prior to that, I can't remember off the top of my head who had it, but we just pass through whatever the state land charges us, we charge our sublessee. And I say there's administrative headache. It's one of those things because it comes up infrequently. Austin and I have to remind ourselves, we get some email from the state land and we go back and look at it. it's not I mean, it probably takes a day's worth of time to manage all year round. So it's not a terrible overburden, but it's something we do. For me, the reason I ask it of the board is that I struggle to ask myself, why do we have a grazing lease?
Why does it cost us any administrative headache? I mean, really?
Yes, unless the board would like to go one step further and start raising cows ourselves, which.
And I guess, I'm sorry,
No.
and I guess we can't impose that administrative to our employee to do. And
Well. Yes and no. So could we say, sublessee, you're required now to interact with state land? Well, state land wants to be with us because they don't have a contractual relationship with him. The risk to us is that for some reason that's messed up or not done right, and there are any penalties that accrue from
comes
that,
back on us.
it comes back on us. So we've been unwilling to outsource the administrative part of that, and simply require the sublessee to sign a lease with us and then comply, and it incorporates our lease requirements.
And there's no way that he can take over that lease because he doesn't own the 40 acres that's tied into it. Is that correct? Or can he take?
If he had some other land, and it doesn't have to be contiguous, so let's say he owned a piece of land down in Duncan. Then arguably he could apply for that lease as well and tie it to his in-holding that's not necessarily next to it. So, but that would be between him and state land or
Right.
whoever else. There are other people in the neighborhood who have some grazing leases nearby that might wish to apply for it. And so, but that'd be between whoever wants to bid with state land to get the grazing lease and state land. We would be out of it at that point.
So why don't we go down that path so we don't upset anybody and but give that first offer to that one that's leasing our employee, that he take it over, because we want to just get out of it, period.
Two thoughts. One is if we get out of it, we are no longer in between them and state land. In other words, that's
Right.
state land runs their own way of how they issue grazing leases.
Right.
We could certainly give them heads up and say, hey, we're gonna get out. You might want to apply first.
Yeah.
But whatever their process is, and I think it's a bidding process, then he may be the only bidder. He's the only person who showed up when we asked about it the last time. And so, but that essentially we would give him heads up, say, we're planning on getting out of this grazing lease. If you want to apply, now's the time to do so. But if not, I would not suggest that we interject ourselves into his process or anybody else's process.
Yeah.
Other than to say, if the
Yeah.
board directs, we're gonna walk away from the lease.
The fair thing is
To
to
get-
notify him, let him know.
We would notify him regardless because we have a contractual relationship with him.
Yeah.
But I don't think that there's a need for us to keep that grazing lease. We're not running cows out there. And we're not gonna develop that 40 acres until, you know.
Not today or tomorrow. And even if
Or
we
40
did,
years ago.
or even 40 years, but even if we did,
Yeah.
I don't know that it would be dependent upon the grazing lease to do something with. I suppose arguably if we put a meat slaughterhouse out there, we could slaughter our own 6 cows a year or whatever. But,
Off on the track.
So can we, at this point, just give you direction to do that and see how he responds to the situation?
what would be preferable at this point is to give the staff direction to find out how we extract ourselves from the lease.
Right.
How we notify our sublessee, and then come back to you with a definitive decision to formally end the lease agreement, if that's what the board desires.
Yeah, I think so directed.
I second that.
Motion has been made and
No
second.
motion, we'll
No
just take
motion.
direction.
Oh, yeah, that's not a motion.
We
That's
will
right.
simply
It's a
take
direction.
From the
Direction.
board to
Come
come
on,
back to
guys.
you with a formal action based on
How to
the
get out of
direction.
the
given.
lease.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
Okay.
Got
And
that?
I think that would accomplish the goal of what we're looking.
and if there's something I've missed, I'll let you know that too.
Okay, so now we're going to, thank you, Derek, on that, and now we're going to item B, discussion and possible action regarding the state of the roof and weather sealing on the current jail facility.
Okay, Supervisor Gomez is gonna correct me if I get some facts wrong, but in short, the local Catholic church in Clifton had some roof repairs that need to be done. So a contractor was contacted. He has a bit of a unique way of doing roofs. the Catholic Church employed him. They did a great job. They're very happy with it. As a result of that, Supervisor Gomez asked if he would look at our jail roof. And so he did. He went up there and he gave us an estimate of what it might cost and what other extra work might need to be done. One of the reasons we have been hesitant to throw money at that facility is that we don't know what that facility is going to be. I was prepared at one point to come in and give you a new breakdown on what our jail utilization is. Let me just say that it's gone through the roof relative to what it was the last 3 or 4 years, as was highlighted in our last meeting. We are averaging, we went from 7.33 over the last 3.5, 4 years, about 3 years. In January, we were at 8 or 9. In February, at 11. March, we were at 14.5 average daily inmates per day. Right now, in April, we're on pace to surpass 16 or 17. What does that do? It changes some of our calculations. So if our jail population is held at under 10, we would be looking to contract for outsourcing that service at roughly 10 beds per day. We would probably double that. That means cost increase. So that analysis needs to take place. More importantly, however, we don't have enough data points to know whether we are on a temporary trend or whether we are on a new normal going forward. The sheriff assures me we're on a new normal and that they're going to go up even more. And I don't doubt that's true. Whether that holds over the next 4, 5, 6 months is something else. So at this point, I think our data is too new to really give a cost estimate on jail services. The question then becomes, is that building as it stands, regardless of its use, something that we intend to keep? So let's take one area, we outsource all of our inmate services. We don't keep inmates here anymore. Would that space be used for offices, either for the sheriff's office or move our JP or whatever we do? If so, then it would make sense to repair that roof. Now, the roof, Tony tells me, is the roof itself, the main surface appears to be okay, but the joints where the previous roofing job was laid up next to the walls appears to be an area where there's leakage. There's also appears to be some leakage through the masonry, which may require a seal. But we're probably looking at $100,000 in that neighborhood to do roof repair. That's a capital project. So we've only got one proposal, and it's from the company that Supervisor Gomez has, and our own purchasing requires us to get at least 3 probably sealed bids if we think it'll be over 100,000. The question really is, do we want to move forward on doing something with the roof? My anticipation is that the building itself is sound. In other words, it could be repurposed. It could be renovated. It could, one possibility is to demolish it. My recommendation is we don't go that route because otherwise, I mean, the building is sound as near as we can tell. And so preserving it, office space is a lot cheaper to remodel to than a jail. Wooden doors with hinges are cheaper than metal doors with electronic locks. And everything else. But if the board would direct us, we could then go explore what needs to be done in greater detail, not just with one contractor, but with 2 or 3, well, at least 3, and find out what the thing would do. My suggestion would be is that we put this on our capital projects list for next year, that we start working up the bids from this point, and find out what it would take us to preserve that roof and the structure so we can stop it from leaking now and preserve the building. I mean, even a sound building, if it rains inside, is going to become unsound before too long.
Because it is leaking still.
There is, well, and we haven't had a rain in months.
Well,
to
yeah,
really
yeah,
test
but
it.
yeah.
So either we can pray for rain or God can punish us with a great storm to test our roof. But at this point, we believe it is still likely leaking. And
With
so
the age of the building, it's probably still leaking.
yeah, we were, I think it was completed in 78.
Yeah.
Or 70, 77, somewhere in there. So we're approaching 40 years. 50 years.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like him to look into it. Gather some bids. And then we can go from there.
I think So what you've gotten right now is a budgetary estimate, right? It's not an official quote, you got a budgetary estimate.
Correct.
On the cost. So to give you a roundabout idea of what it's gonna cost. So now we know that we probably need to go out for sealed bids, right? I think, I'm gonna give my opinions for given direction, that we probably need to come up with that cap number for that facility, right? Whether that's 18 inmates, whether that's 20, whatever that cap is, and then anything over and beyond that cap, we start the outsourcing process, right? So we get to that,
Okay.
that number that facility will be able to handle with our current workforce. And anything over and beyond that, that's where we start to introduce the outsourcing to Graham County.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's my,
And
My-
what is that number? How many will it hold?
Well, it was originally designed for, I think it was 38.
Oh,
We have
really?
had as many as high 50s, 60. They double bunked everything. Brought in some, all of the, at one point, the Graham County Jail was under federal court order to renovate or demolish. And so they moved their female population over to us. This was 16 years ago or more. And so we had double bunked everybody and we were charging Graham County a fee to keep their female population over here. The feasibility of double bunking is questionable now. The realistic capacity is probably 25 to 30. We could probably squeeze in a few more. One of the challenges we have is inmate classification. So if, for example, we had an axe murderer in there, they're going to treat that person differently, try to segregate that into person from the rest of the population. That's difficult to do as we approach higher numbers. We just simply don't have the bed space to do it. But I can work with the sheriff and let you know what a realistic cap population is.
and let's
Yeah,
set that,
so
let's set that cap and start that transition.
Yeah,
And-
let's not squeeze it. Let's be prepared for
The overflow.
the overflow. And
Okay.
come up with a certain number that's where we end. And then we outsource like Ron said. Yeah,
Okay.
I
That's a
agree.
good way to introduce that outsourcing opportunity too, I
Okay.
think.
I will work on that with the jail staff and the sheriff and find out what a realistic, not an optimistic, but a realistic day in, day out.
But-
Which would include things like, what if something goes wrong? What do you
Yeah.
do with them?
And then also just to end my point is that, I do feel that is an asset for us, asset for Greenlee County is that building, whether it's functioning as a jail or if it's functioning as anything else. And we should take care of it. So I do think that getting that on the capital projects list and then sending it out for actual bids, just so we can maintain that facility for whatever it's being used for in the future, but.
Because, and Tony, I mean, you can attest to this. There's no settlement on that building and it's a sound block, well-built structure, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
foundation
it's
is
just-
Good on it.
Yeah,
So let's
Lot
protect
it's
the roof.
only the leakage of the roof that's causing headaches over there.
Well, that's a little simplified because some of the other things don't work as like they used to when they were new either.
Well,
but
no,
from a
I get
building
that, but
soundness
yeah,
perspective, it's good.
yeah.
But for a jail that's for a max of 20 or something like that, then it might still feel that, that's still a usable space for that amount of people. And then, whatever that number is, but like I said, I don't wanna say we could get 38 or we could get 35. If the max, based on our current, support and staffing is 25, then that's what we need to set, but that's for the sheriff to provide to us. And,
I'll work with
Yeah.
Tyler and the sheriff on that.
but I do think we need to protect that asset.
Okay, in which case, we will likely, and we'll talk about the budget session here in just a second. We'll move that to a capital project and we'll begin to work up what the likely cost to repair or replace the roof.
Do you agree, Will?
Yes, and that
Okay.
would be a capital discussion there, 25, 26. Right?
Correct, and I'll address that as we get to
So
that.
that
part
would be
the-
out of
the agenda.
prior funds. That would be something to be looking forward. to.
Correct.
So we can plan.
Any
for-
ARPA funds?
We
Right.
whisper those words anymore. We don't have any ARPA funds anymore.
Okay.
The LATCF.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
That's all I have on item B.
All right, we're going into, thank you, Derek, on that. We're going into IMC, discussion possible action. Wait a minute. Oh, yeah, we didn't give direction or anything on the other one, but he knows. We did.
No, will you give me direction
Yeah.
to,
You're good
Yeah.
with that?
You're
yes,
good with that.
establish cap and work toward the capital project listing.
All right, so we're on C, discussion and possible action, consideration of a policy change in the county purchasing policy to expand options for acquiring vehicles for county purposes. Or
Okay.
yours.
I have given you each a hard copy of this. Unfortunately, I realized yesterday that I did not push send to send this to Bianca to include in your packet. So the version you got in your packet was an earlier draft. The one you have in front of you is, we're not gonna take action on it today because you didn't get it today and we didn't get public notice out on it today. What I'm proposing and ask you to think about this is an more expansive reading or application of our vehicle purchasing policy. What you see below is in the strikeout area is our current policy. So underneath the red. And it essentially said that all vehicles had to go through sealed bid process. Now, typically our sealed bid process, even a few years ago, was 75,000 more. It's now $100,000 or more. Our cars don't cost $100,000 a piece. But we nevertheless required ourselves under policy to go vehicle sealed bid purchase for vehicles. That was likely as much political as policy. Because at the time we had dealers, both here locally as well as in the Grand County area that would regularly bid on our vehicles. We now get typically bids only from the local vendor here in town. And there's a variety of reasons for that. They're not being unfair or anything, but they're winning most of the bids. What has raised this issue from my perspective is that there are new ways to buy vehicles that did not exist at the time this policy was written. We are acquainted somewhat with the enterprise fleet lease program. There are other ones. Tommy sent me one yesterday from who? Bancorp. We're talking to them about a way to lease police cars that would come fully upfitted to us. So they show up done. Austin, the other day, we were talking about this, pulled up, you can buy a Hyundai now on Amazon. You can buy a BMW on Amazon. And my first reaction is we don't want Hyundais or Amazon or BMWs. But I tell you, if Hyundai moves 7 million units through Amazon this year, it won't be long for Chevy and Toyota and everybody else in the world to be on Amazon. There are new ways of acquiring vehicles. And my concern is if we lock ourselves into one way of purchasing, one acquisition method, then we are likely driving up our own costs and it'd be like hanging on to a ditto machine when we got scanners. The policy I put in front of you, I'd like you to think about it, essentially says we will consider vehicles like we do any other purchase. If it's $100,000 more vehicle, then we're going out sealed bids. If it's like most of them, somewhere between 15,000 and 100,000, then we would have a bunch of different options. And what we would do is likely come to the board and say, we believe that we should explore a lease purchase option or a lease option, or we should buy off Amazon, or we should go out and get bids from local dealers, or we should go to our purchasing contracts, which is where our heavy equipment is through. That's through a purchasing cooperative that we belong to, or state contract. I talked to the city of Thatcher. They're buying their police vehicles off the lot from Midway Chevrolet these days. Because they have a bunch of them. And so what this would do is expand our ability to look at different acquisition. And I've carefully removed purchase and replaced with the word acquisition. Because what we need is a police vehicle, or we need a truck with the road department, or we need a fleet vehicle for people to get around wherever they need to go. How or what method we use should also be considered just like the price, the lowest best option. If that happens to be a lease, then let's go with a lease. If that happens to be a purchase, let's go with a purchase. But what I'd like the board to consider, and if we want to tweak it, please send me your tweaks. But I'd like to expand those options so that the county has every purchase or acquisition method available to it. And if we start buying them off Amazon, then we'll know that we've hit a new age of purchasing.
Well, the way things are going and currently, all our vehicles are gonna be over 100,000. I hate to say that, but you know, it is what it is,
Yeah.
you know.
I
But-
think with having that.
Unless they're built in
But-
the US. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, well,
If Jeff Bezos starts making the vehicles himself.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Then we're in business.
And I didn't mean to imply that too, because I wanted to be sarcastic or anything, but you know,
This would allow us our greatest flexibility too.
yeah.
Yeah.
In both
Yeah.
what we acquire and
As
how
I've
we
learned with the
acquire.
ambulances, we may have a monetary question, but we may have a flexibility issue like the ambulances. We want to have that
Correct.
availability and we need it quickly, then we can go another avenue.
Correct.
And the what we require really is, I mean, up to the fleet department and I guess us, but you know, to. Keep
Correct.
the, you know, keep consistent fleet, that type of thing, you know, we don't wanna just start throwing in, you know, Toyotas or Hondas and stuff where you have to buy all new tools for public works, you know what I mean, because you have to work on all these things, so. I
Right.
get that part, but.
Well, one of the things that we've discussed even internally, Tony and I, is that, you know, if depending on how we acquire vehicles and dispose of vehicles, we may be able to eliminate a lot of our maintenance costs because we rotate through a vehicle at a certain mileage point. Tony's done a lot of study on a and at some point I'm gonna have him present his own internal study on our vehicles, probably at our next meeting. But the city of Dallas, which has some 7,000 vehicles, they have a very you know, well-tuned or an analytical tool. They say when this vehicle hits this number on our chart, we get rid of it and get a replacement. So those kinds of things, exactly. What we need is a reliable fleet that does the jobs that we need a fleet for. How we get them and at what price is where we ought to do the best with the county's dollars that we can. So with that, I'd like you to think about it. You have, I don't want you to adopt today because you didn't get it, the public didn't get notice of it, but I would, and that's on me. I just failed to hit send with Bianca last week.
So we'll put this on the next agenda.
I'll put this on the next agenda.
All right,
Yes,
So no
okay?
action possible needed.
Correct.
No,
okay. Thank you for all that information. We will now move into our next item of business. Derek.
I'll be very brief here. The state budget right now, I visited with three people yesterday about this current state of the budget. There seems to be a lot of tension between the Senate and the House. Shocking. Well, they're both controlled by the same party. But if you recall, 2 budget years ago, there was a $2 billion surplus. And so the way they solved the budget discussion was that everybody gets $25 million to do what you want. Some of it went to the Prescott Rodeo Ground, some of it went in tax rebate. And basically says, everybody gets some money, you do what you want. This year, there's currently a projected $500 million surplus, which is not much in a $14 billion budget. The Senate is saying, let's do the same thing. Everybody gets some money. It may turn out to be like $10. You can give away whatever you want. There's not much left. The House is taking a more philosophical approach. We want to shape the budget to meet our political, philosophical government framework. There are things we want to fund. There are things we don't want to fund. And so they are apparently miles apart. None of the people that I talk to are aware that talks have seriously begun. So there's 2 suggestions right now. One, to send everybody home for about 3 or 4 weeks, all of the legislators, while leadership gets in a room and hacks out some sort of approach. Now, they haven't included the governor in any of this yet. And so at some point she has to be brought in because she signs it or she doesn't. The other is that they continue to work, that they continue to do something. They're going to start running out of bills to talk about soon. With 2,200 bills to start with, they're under 300, I think now. And they're either signed or not. And so there's not any consensus on what leadership will do next. What does that mean for us? It means that we don't know what their budget's going to look like. So in as much as we interact with the state, we don't know what our budget will look like. We're doing our best to try and guess what that will be. And a lot of it is fairly predictable. But my worry is that they get down to the nitty gritty and well, you'll recall, Supervisor Warren was not here, but 4 years ago, literally on the last day of the legislature, they gave the counties a bunch of money to go recruit, retain officers. We had no budget way to do it. We threw it in last minute and then hoped it would work. It's that sort of 11:55 surprise before the clock strikes midnight that I worry about. We've planned, and Renee has done a lot of planning. I think we're well situated for what we know. It would be the last minute cost shift or last minute pot of money we've got to manage that we're not as ready for yet. So that's all I have on that front legislatively. Right now, there's not a lot happening at the federal level. They resolved a little procedural tiff within the House so they can move some elections and other things through. We'll see if that actually takes place. Not surprising, there's growing tension in Washington. What does that mean? Growing tension and uncertainty in our budget. So I'll leave it at that.
So nothing's changed.
Yeah, since January 1. Okay. Thanks, Terry. Bianca, the floor is yours.
This Friday, the 11th, is county managers, and then LPC meetings every Friday, the rest of the month. Eco and small counties on the 16th, CSA on the 17th. Our next board meeting will be on the 22nd. That's all I have for April. May, our first board meeting will be on the 6th, county managers on the 9th, Eco and small counties Wednesday the 14th, CSA on the 15th. Our second board meeting will be May 20th. Morenci Duncan junior high promotion on the 22nd. And the high school, both high school graduations on the 23rd. Our offices are closed on Monday, the 26th. And that's all I have for that month. June 3rd, the first Tuesday, is our first board meeting. County managers on the 13th. There's no small counties or CSA for the month of June. Or Eco, there's no date for Eco. Our second board meeting is the 17th, and that is scheduled for the proposed budget, the tentative budget. Be adopted that meeting. And that's all I have for June.
Anybody have anything that they want to add to the calendar?
No, just as we, I mean, we should probably have discussions as we approach getting deeper into budget work sessions and things. As you know, if it works out for us or everyone, that maybe we can do those in the afternoons, you know, when we know that we're gonna have lengthy budget
Budget work
sessions.
sessions.
I mean, that's just my idea, but I think if we were to start those in the afternoon, then who cares how long it goes, you know what I mean? I mean, I guess everybody does, but yeah. Make you talk faster, how about that?
I think Supervisor Campbell has an excellent idea.
What we'll do is coordinate with Justice of the Peace and make sure that we schedule those on days that we're not in conflict with court.
I'm in protest of that. The earlier the better, huh, Renee? The earlier the better, get it out of the way.
You're on top of your game.
It takes you a while to wake up.
Okay, I'm a team player. I'm gonna go ahead and go with that. Crazy idea. All right. We got that
We'll
clear?
bring in dinner for you, Dave.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'll bring cookies, how about that?
Oh,
I'll bring corn dogs.
how about a steak? How about a steak?
Yeah.
Okay. We are done. Thank you, Bianca. So we've already approved the consent agenda.
Mhm.
So we move into item 11, supervisor reports. Gentlemen, anyone have anything that they want to share?
I don't have anything to report on this one.
Friday of last week, I'd like to thank our Derek Rapier for assisting, and our Mr. Hines down at the fairgrounds. We had a county meeting down there about the direction we're going with the county, with the fairgrounds down there, and what we're doing and what we have been doing, and then we had a
small discussion about our funds and that they may be limited, they may not be. We don't know the full answer to that right now. We had, 25 people there?
Mhm.
25 people, went on for about 2 hours and was very informative. Had some back and forth discussion, and after we had further discussion, so it was a great time, and we're gonna continue to do that with that project down there so that everybody's aware. But very positive. And again, I'd like to thank the county employees for assisting with that. Austin was also there, so I didn't want to forget him. So thank you very much for the help and the assistance there. That was a great experience. And that's all I have for now.
Can I ask a question regarding
Sure.
that? With, based on that information, was the meeting cantankerous? Was it?
It was very well received, very positive.
Good.
Yeah, there was no, hey, you got it all wrong. There are a couple of tweaks that were suggested, but minor. I would classify it as very positive and momentum building.
If somebody needed to get in contact for the upcoming fair, regarding a table or whatever, who would they get in contact with?
For right now, reach out to our office in Austin. We will have a person on board probably by next week. We've extended an offer and it's been accepted, but until that's been formalized, but we're ready to go.
Yeah, I mentioned contact Carolyn or Laura, so.
Yes, that's the place to start.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything to share at this time, so this meeting's adjourned.
Oh, no, we have a budget work session.
Oh, that's right.
take that
Excuse
back.
me, I'll take that back.
Good, because you're about to get a show here.
Yeah, yeah.
Must be Christmas time.
You'll understand why in just a second.
Oh, gosh.
Is the video working?
It better be, huh? Okay, there we go. All right.
Oh, could I forget that budget work session? You got me all worked up about the afternoon ones.
Okay.
Oh, my goodness.
We're gonna talk budgets. Okay,
All right.
you'll
I might
understand.
need that later.
This is my crystal ball. It happens to have inside of it etched the Washington Mall, the monument, the White House, the Capitol. I think you'll discover very quickly why. To those on YouTube, there you go. All right. What we're going to talk about is two topics. One is wages, and the other is capital project. So you can take me seriously. Should I move my garb here? At least my eye patch so I can see.
Point well taken.
Okay, there you go. I'll quit my prognostication now. As we sit here today, the latest numbers we have are the February inflation numbers. We do not have March. That will come in about a week. These are current inflation rates based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Consumer Price Index. Many things in both federal, state, and even some local government are tied to the CPI. That's the inflator that is used. So the national current inflation rate is 2.8%. That's as of yesterday. The Phoenix Metro, which primarily focuses on Phoenix, Scottsdale, and Mesa, is at 1.8%. There are segments of Arizona's economy that move differently than the national economy. And so, housing being one of them, fuel being one of those. And so that's another more local indicator. Social Security for fiscal year 25 gave a 2.5 COLA increase. That's also generally reflective of what they think inflation will be. The challenge, of course, is what do we have going forward? So the current consensus of projected inflation, if the tariffs persist but are only short term, is probably 3% or more. I found almost nobody who will predict inflation if the tariffs continue to have the economic impact that they've had in the last 3 or 4 days. For example, yesterday, the stock market started out, it opened up at about 1,400 down. It got as low as 1,700 points down, which was about 3%. It then rallied because at one point there was a rumor on the floor that these tariffs would be paused for 90 days. It shot up to 22.50. It was above the mark by almost 5%, just short of 5%. President Trump came out and said, no, we're not talking about a 90-day pause. And we finished in negative territory at 349. That was in one day. That's the single largest volatility ever in the stock market, 2,600 points plus in one day. I looked this morning, when I came up, set up my computer, the Dow was up 1,400 points. As of just a couple of minutes ago, it was up only 168. That was literally just before I turned on my PowerPoint here. Stock losses since January 1st. There you see the percentages. The S&P has lost almost 14% of its value. Dow Jones almost 11. NASDAQ is in what they call bull market or bear market territory. And the Russell 2000, which is a much broader index, is down, nearly 19% since January 20th. That's actually since the new administration. I've said this more times than I can count. At this point, for planning, it does not matter whether you think the Trump administration is doing the right thing or the wrong thing, or some right and some wrong. For purposes of planning and fiscal certainty, it's creating a tremendous, almost overwhelming amount of uncertainty. So there are two schools of thought on what the tariffs are done. One is that it is meant to be a shock to the system and reset our relationship with our trading partners, particularly our allies. Trump is convinced that we've been taken advantage of for decades. And so this would be a shock, come back to the table and negotiate it. European Union yesterday said that they would agree to 0 zeros. We don't charge you, you don't charge us. Vietnam was the very first to suggest that. Vietnam has become, and Cambodia, that Southeastern Asia has become the new China. There have been a lot of things that we were manufacturing in China a couple of years ago that have moved to that area of the world. Vietnam was the very first to say, we'll go 0-0 with you. Trump said specifically that wasn't good enough. I don't know what else he's got concerns about, but so if this is the game plan, then the stock market will likely recover sooner, but I'm not reading anybody who has a good prediction of how much or when. It takes a while to regain losses. It takes a while for people to trust the market again. People are pulling out right now, which is why the stocks are dropping. Conversely, gold is at an all-time high right now. It's considered a safe haven investment. T-bills or treasury bonds that are sold by the government are considered the safest investment of all. Their prices have risen, which means interest rates are lower. Interest rates on bonds are inverse to the price. So what does that mean? It could mean lower mortgage rates. It could mean lower consumer lending rates. That is if this what's happening. Now, one of the things we've heard several times is this isn't an effort to stimulate domestic manufacturing. That is typically a years-long process as opposed to a short process. For example, Resolution Copper has been in the works for 15, 20 years. That's mining. That's worse than most. But I've heard talk that even the Hayden smelter, which was mothballed less than 10 years ago, that there are companies sniffing around the edges to try and get that back up into production. Because there are, I believe, only 3 working smelters in the United States right now for copper, which means all of copper ore and copper, everything sends out to other countries to smelt, and then we get the copper back. Having said that, it takes a long time to bring a smelter back online or to build a alternator factory. And that's assuming there's not any regulatory overlay. So part of this shock system approach ignores the fact that we still have laws in place that say you gotta watch out for Fluffy the animal and your pet plant, endangered species. Let's suppose that this, as as he signaled yesterday, that this is not a shot come to the table. Let's suppose that Trump believes this is the new normal. We're gonna reset the entire international trade imbalances forever. That is what's causing this huge market drops and volatility, is because that we no longer anywhere in the world make a product start to finish in one location, unless it's a very simple product. Cars are a great example. There may be parts made literally all over the world that are assembled in part in Mexico and then sent to US to be assembled into a car. The supply chains are global at this point. So if this is an attempt to reset entire global supply chains, the risk is much higher. The likelihood that stock markets recover is probably closer to 2008, when it took 12 years to go back and recover the losses. Domestic manufacturing, does it come back? Or does an overall recession mean that we're likely going to be unable to secure the financing to build those? I mean, what no one knows. We'll likely know in a few days or weeks whether this is intended to be persistent, as the administration said over the weekend, or if this is a harsh temporary condition meant to bring traders to the trading table, as was said by the administration over the weekend. They're saying both. How does that affect our wage decision? And that's what it really comes down to. Let's take a quick glance at our own budget health, because frankly, until Austin and Renee and I sit down yesterday and talk, I was extremely nervous about it, suggesting any kind of raise. But there are some indicators in our budget that we are healthy. During the pandemic, when we planned for disaster, we ended up with bonus. We not only did not see a drop in our revenue, we actually saw it explode for about 2-3 years. At one point, we had predicted, I think, to receive about 5 million. We got 9 million in shared sales tax revenue. We've been able to bank that in certain areas. We've been able to wisely use federally sourced dollars to pay down some debts so that we don't have that lingering debt payment. Most of our sister counties around the state are paying off low interest bonds for the next 20 years. We paid off our debt with cash. As a result, we've been able to establish a healthy carry forward. We at this point estimated that would be between $10 and $11 million, which is about where it was last year. We have federally sourced capital funds. So we no longer have ARPA dollars. Those have been moved into capital funds. And so those are available to us. We identify them internally for our accounting purposes, so we know where we're billing stuff to, but they are no longer ARPA dollars. There is another set of funds called the LACTF, which is local and tribal, local and tribal consistency funds. I probably missed an act or letter in there. They are not tied to specific, there's no strings attached to that, if you will. So we believe we're safe. But in the current environment, now Doge has sort of lost the front page because of all the tariffs. And maybe Mr. Musk is on his way out. Yesterday, he posted to his own social media that he thinks the tariffs are a dumb idea. He may be persona non grata by tomorrow. We don't know. But our own budget is in good shape. We've got a roughly $5 million balance in our capital improvement fund. We have been using this other money first, and we'll continue to do so. In fact, we met as our internal working group on our capital projects, and we're going to accelerate some of that progress using these funds so that we can get it spent for legitimate projects and get them out the door. If things got really bad, we could budget adjust and move some of this capital stuff into our operating budget. I don't think we'll need to. Mr. Warren is not familiar with this, but we keep a $2 million revolving debt retirement fund. That is, if we close the doors tomorrow, we can pay off all of our debts for our heavy equipment and whatever else we have. We also keep a $4 million budget stabilization fund, which is meant to, if all of a sudden revenues crash, it's meant to supplement our budget until we can get to an override election or anything else we need to do to try and fix it.
Which is roughly like 18 months. So we
Right, till we
that's
hit
why
the
we
next
have to have
election cycle. We would begin to pare down. We have a specific policy that we adopt every year that tells us what we do when revenues begin to decline at certain percentages. as we will visit with departments and electeds, we will emphasize this uncertainty and say, here's what we think you can do with the budget. Let's negotiate within that. But be prepared in case things go really bad. And that may be layoff plans, that may be capital postponement. We don't know. I don't want to preach doomsday because in many respects, our budget is very healthy. We have some known revenue losses. I don't think SRS is coming back. Right now, nobody's even talking about it back there right now. They're talking about changing federal election law. They're talking about other things that are on Trump's agenda. We've also lost, and I expect we will probably still lose some health department grants. I think that's coming. Those are known revenue losses. Our half-cent local sales tax is coming in just about where we predicted, but it's been a roller coaster. It's been up and down, and on so on the whole, when you look at a year, we're going to hit pretty much on the money. Yeah, we're right on it. But boy, it's been an up and down ride getting there. Shared sales tax revenue will depend a lot on recessionary and inflationary pressure. If inflation goes up, or the cost of producing copper goes up, or on the statewide economy, if people start putting their money in savings and not spending it, we're a consumer-based economy, then shared sales tax begins to drop. Counties will be the first canary in the mine shaft because we rely on it more than any other unit of government as one of our primary sources. We don't get income tax and so forth. So, but I think our budget is healthy. It is healthy right now. Can it withstand a bad year? It could. Can it withstand 2 or 3 bad years in a row? Not without adjustment. Renee has worked up the cost of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% payroll wage increase. These would be across the board increases. You can see the hit to the general fund of just a 1% is about, and this includes EREs. And I'll make these charts available to you as well. But this includes EREs. So if you went 1%, that's 66.875. We have been able to keep our employees safe from inflation for the last 4 years. We've done 3% and 5% and so forth raises to stay ahead of inflation. In fact, in a couple of years, we actually got ahead of inflation. You recall 1 year we gave our lowest paid employees the largest raise, the highest paid employees the smallest raise. So our entry level folks didn't get hurt by inflation. But there was a year, for example, we passed 5% increase and the inflation shook out to be a little over 3%. If you accept the premise that inflation will likely be in the 3% range, if this trade war thing settles down quickly, many are predicting that inflation could float down into the 2s. It's a 2.8, it could go as low as 2.1. Having said that, 69% of CEOs surveyed yesterday believe that we are already in recession and it will persist throughout most of the year. JP Morgan Chase yesterday said that they believe there's a 60% chance of recession. A hedge fund manager who is an ardent Trump supporter said that we have created our own self-imposed nuclear winter. In other words, we didn't have to do this to ourselves. So there's not a lot of confidence out there. Like I say, whether you agree or whether you don't agree, at this point, we're trying to read nationwide confidence. Economics are a reflection of how confident people feel. If I know I'm getting a paycheck next week, maybe I take my family out to dinner this week. If I don't know I'm going to be employed next week, I'm saving it all and I'm buying, mac and cheese or making beans and rice. And so it affects spending and it affects certainly car spending. People are saying $3,000 to $8,000 to $10,000, depending on what car, where it came from. No one knows what it'll be because that Ford that is finished in Detroit may have been mostly manufactured all over the world. Toyota may be one of the highest built in America brands right now because they're building them in North Carolina and Ohio. No one knows how that shakes out. And if you don't know, you maybe don't buy. Mm-hmm. If we look just at our special revenue funds, and again, this is for Chairman or Supervisor Wern, there are funds that come from grants, from other revenue sources that are not general fund, and we have people employed in those things. And so if we were to do a 1% raise, for example, the special funds only, That would be $41,350. That would be the cost, EREs included. Now, with a lot of these people, these employees, they know that if their grant goes away, their job likely goes away. There are several employees throughout the county that are funded by a hodgepodge of grants, maybe 3 or 4 different grants. And so if one grant went away, maybe their hours get cut. They know that upfront. And so, but that's still something, if we pass an across the board raise, it affects our special revenue funded employees as well. So our last highlight here is the total payroll. 1% would be $108,000. If we look at where I think our decision point is, it lies in the general fund. If we, and you had asked us to look at 1%, 3%, and 5%, we multiplied that out, so we've given the board a lot more choices. This could be a 2.7, it could be a 5.3. I mean, there's you can have whatever you want, but this gives you some parameters of where that would cost us in a budget. Our budget last year, our overall general fund budget was $20 million. And so, and I don't have an answer to that red question there, but in addition to pay across the board wages, there are some things we need to do. We put off making some adjustments. There were some clerk positions that really need to be moved to administrative assistants. There may be a couple of positions that need some individualized market adjustments. There'll be fewer because we've hit a lot of those. And then there'll be some position shifts that have been funded. And this has been a part of a 3-year plan where there's been some grant funding and piecemeal funding that over time we've moved it towards the general fund for stability. And then, like I say, I think there'll be a request to add a position or 2. We can afford this if we continue to be conservative and if we continue to watch our revenues and so forth. So I don't have an estimated cost of the adjustments and positions if we add all of those together. And frankly, we're not sure exactly how much that will be. So for now, we'd ask that you focus on the wage increase, and we are going to recommend a 3%. This represents about a 1% increase in our overall budget. So 200,000 roughly divided by 20 million is roughly 1%. Our overall budget spend is primarily employees. That's where most of our money goes. We have some high dollar items, we have some capital items, but our day-to-day expenses is mostly people. Does this keep our employees ahead of inflation? We're not certain. As we sit here today with the volatility that we're having, I would say yes. If you ask me in a week or a month, we don't know. And that is simply, I hate this kind of environment. I can take bad news and plan for it. I can take good news and plan for it. But if you don't know, not only from day to day, but hour to hour, whether the news is good or bad, and you're seeing that in the markets, not just the stock markets, but the bond markets, the precious metal markets. You're seeing it in international markets. You're seeing it in exchange rates. The dollar is losing value against other major currencies right now. And that reflects nothing more than economic uncertainty. We don't know what's coming. So we'll do our best to plan for what we have. We've got a strong budget position. We're healthy. We've got a lot of volatility. If the board were uncomfortable with this, we have done in the past, and Supervisor Gomez and Campbell remember, where raises were delayed till September 1st. Or there can be a split where, let's say you feel good about 3, but let's say 2% come July 1 and 1% again in January, depending on what the economy looks like then. Our recommendation is to go with 3. That recommendation may change over the next week or 2 or 3. But for purposes of building a budget, our recommendation is 3. And then as things become hopefully more clear, it sounds like Pollyanna, doesn't it? Like hopefully it's more clear. Then we may come back and say, let's split it. Let's delay it. Let's do some stuff. And so that's where we're at. And so that's why I wore the garb, because frankly, right now it feels like fortune telling. I could put it back on to reemphasize the point.
We got the point. We got the point.
It feels so uncertain right now.
Well, with all that has been said, Derek, and I appreciate that. I'm okay with the 3, right down the middle from the 1 to the 5 on the 3, but we need to keep an eye on it. Like you said, things can change in the next couple of weeks or whatever. And then until, we get to that point and we make the final decision, but I
think to give you your tools to be able to move
Yeah.
forward, I say base that on the three, and I agree with that. And then, hey, in a month, before we're setting this, we might be able to, we might do something lower, we might be able to adjust a little bit, but we can. But
And if it looks uncertain for a long term, because once we do this three, we own it forever. We have not ever come back and said, we're taking you 3% back.
Well, no, I'm
No,
saying.
but
before we finalize, adopt.
So I'm saying for right now, to build that tentative budget,
Yeah.
use the three. If we get closer to, when the crystal ball becomes a little more clear before we're adopting the tentative budget, then we might have to make some adjustments. There.
Cause you could plug in that 2 or
We could,
or
and we will
or
build
whatever,
whatever,
and
so that we can toggle a switch
Yeah.
and change that.
Yeah.
You cover that too, Supervisor Warren?
Yeah, our county employees are a resource
Absolutely.
Yeah.
and a valuable resource.
Well, we've invested quite a bit
Replacement.
in certainly in many of them, they've been here for years and they do some things that you can't just go off the street and find
Replacement of
somebody to
that
do it.
knowledge is very expensive.
It is.
Then we need to make beyond this, make those adjustments.
Okay.
So I think while we have the opportunity, we should take advantage of that. There's gonna be times where we may not be able to do that.
But if there's a possibility that we possibly can, that we absolutely should.
Okay. So we will
We
work from
reserve the
three.
valuable resources.
We will work from three and then adjust as we get new information. Let me cover this real quick. When we do our capital improvement plan. Staff's recommendations, we don't change our tiers, that we don't add anything to save 2 projects, and I'll cover those in a second. One is the jail roof project we just talked about, that we look at adding that to our tier 1 plan. And by way of structure, and I'll cover this with you more individually if you'd like, Supervisor Warren, but several years ago, we just used to throw everything into a pot and say, well, here's what we're gonna plan for, and we kind of got things done and mostly didn't. So about 4 years ago, we switched to a tier. Tier 1 is we're gonna want to get it done this year. Tier 2, plan this year to execute in year 2 or 3. And then an aspirational tier 3 where don't want to lose track of it, but we're not likely working towards it at the moment. The second area that I feel like we need to add, and Bianca and I have talked about this quite a bit, we have what is called a DS 450. Did I get it right?
DS 200,
What's our central count machine?
450.
450. See, I got it right. I always get it wrong and she corrects me. It is this machine. It's kind of fun to watch because it whirls around and it separates the ballots and so forth. But all of our early votes are counted there. And I don't see any slowdown in our early voting. It's still going to be most of our votes. Trouble is, our machine is almost 15 years old.
Yes.
About 15 years old, and it got finicky last year. We got it to work. It did just fine. It passed all the stuff. Meanwhile, Cochise County had a machine go down while they were counting. They had to fly a machine out from Nebraska, get the Secretary of State to certify it, and then start their counting again in a county that's already volatile. Ours is nearing end of life. The company that supplies our machines won't likely support this machine for very much longer. And so we are likely going to ask the board in our capital plan to purchase the latest machine and hopefully get another 12 or 15 years out of it. Price? Let me get to that. Yeah,
TBD.
Be the used car salesman. Let me wait. Let me
Wait,
Is
there's
it made in
more.
the US?
Well, wait, there's more.
If it's not made in the US.
In
buy it right now.
addition, we have on-site tabulators called DS200s. That's a little box. So when you go to vote, you put your ballot in, it counts right then. Counts it to a thumb drive that we then bring back up and central count that. We will probably need to replace some or all of those. They are also nearing end of life.
How many?
We have 3 that we deployed, right?
Yeah, 3 total. Total, we have the DS 200s, we have 11. And then the touchscreen, the express votes, we have 22.
Wow. Our proposal is not to buy them all at once. Our proposal is to break it up into at least 3 purchase years so that 1, it doesn't hit us all right now. And 2, in 8, 10, 12 years, we have to do it again. We're not replacing the whole fleet at one time again. So they too are nearing end of life. They need to be replaced. We've got some time, thanks to Bianca's planning. We don't have to go out on a fire sale and get them all right now, but we should start replacing those. We started a couple of years ago replacing our poll books, and we're up to speed on all our poll books, right? We replaced them all. So again, we did that a few at a time till we were all replaced. But that gets us on a rotation so that we're not having to swallow this great big bill every year.
So did these items you're talking about all get purchased at the same time? How do we know
Originally,
which ones
yes.
we're gonna replace? Oh, they did get all purchased at the same time already?
Yes.
So they all have the same age and everything? So you're just gonna go eeny, meeny, miny, mo and just pick whatever and replace those three or whatever?
Yeah, that's the plan.
It's a little bit more informed than just eeny, meeny, miny, mo, because she knows her machines well.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
She actually puts on a patch.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
They're all, it'll be all new equipment. It'll be the upgraded version of what we have.
But which we retire first.
Yeah, that's
That'd be
my question.
Bianca working with our supplier.
Okay.
And so they'll help identify these 6 have to go. These 6 can wait a year, these 6 wait the next year.
Oh, okay.
And they make, so when this started, and this is real history, but you'll remember Al Gore and the hanging Chad? There was such a problem with all of that thing that the federal government invested hundreds of millions of dollars in getting everybody up into equipment, which unfortunately now a lot of people distrust, but it's worked really well. But we purchased all of that stuff mostly with federal dollars. And to be fair, Bianca has applied for HAVA, which is Help America Vote Act money that is still funded. And so a lot of this equipment would be subsidized, assuming we get those grants. There's a good chance we would, that we would use some federal dollars to begin to replace.
Right.
So
are there any funds currently that we could start buying those
yes,
now? You know what I mean? Rather than waiting for 25,
yes.
Yeah.
We could start today. We have that $5 million capital projects fund. So these are clearly capital project type investments. Particularly we buy them in lots. And so, yes, we have funds that we can use for that. There's some money. We have been generous in our budgeting for our elections primarily. So we have a cushion in case we got sued or something else. So we had emergency funds in case we had to fly in a machine from Nebraska. We've been doing that on purpose. We have been building more safety layers and safety nets financially in elections than probably any other department, simply because the atmosphere around elections has been so tense the last 3 election cycles. And so we've been ready in case something happened. So there's some funds in our elections. There's some funds in our capital to make these purchases. We can begin that process now.
So Ron, you're asking, can we
I'm seeing
start
this.
buying them now before
Right.
the grants come in? Is that what you're saying?
Well-
And then if the grants come in, you replenish that pot, you replenish that pot?
Probably not.
Not?
That'd be the first.
Well, when's our next
What?
election?
Next.
About 18 months from now.
Probably 26,
Mhm.
but possibly they could throw in one this year.
Wow.
Possibly.
And that will be a legislative choice. There's some things, for example, 10 years ago, they changed the formula for getting money out of the state land fund to fund schools. That's getting ready to expire. Without a vote of the people, that expires. And so there are a lot of people think we got plenty of money in public schools right now. I'm not expressing an opinion on that.
Okay.
But there's a lot of Lego sets out there too. Nevertheless, that may be one thing. And there was something else that seemed like that may be on there. No, it was gonna be the spring or something else. And so, but it's possible we could have an election in November and we could make it with the equipment we've got. But 26 will be our next one, and it's looking to be another hot race. I mean, it's they're already interested. Our local congressman, Siscomani, is forever going to be on the edge of he's always going to be a vulnerable seat. If it switches to a Democrat, they're always going to be a vulnerable seat.
Yeah.
It's the nature of our district. And so, yeah, there will be. So that's what we'll angle towards.
So
I don't-
let me get some.
I don't paint that we've got a crisis, with the exception perhaps of our 450. That would be replacing our central count machine would be our highest priority. So we're not in crisis, but if we don't address it over the next 2 or 3 years, we could find ourselves in crisis. We don't.
No, yeah, and I agree with that, but I'm just getting back to the grant that you said you can apply and everything. So why would we want to pull out of our money right now and not utilize the grant, apply for the, how long does it take to get the grant?
The grant's up in the air. You have to apply.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
That's not a slam dunk.
I've applied. Now it's just waiting.
And you don't know when they'll award?
I would tell you that 4 years ago, they were pretty routine. You'd come up with a real reasonable plan and you'd ask, and then turnaround was pretty quick but like everything else right now, it's not as quick. I think, because we're tiny and we don't ask for much, there's a good chance we get awarded.
So, well, okay, let's just hypothetically say we buy that machine next month. And you have that grant in play. And it's awarded. You're saying you can't get that money and throw it into the pot that you took it out of to buy it?
We would have to look at the particulars of the grant.
What's that?
Some grants are reimbursed grants.
Okay.
And some grants, so for example, remember we looked at the fairgrounds? All of the effort we put into moving dirt, we couldn't have gotten reimbursed. We could have gotten engineering reimbursed, but not the moving the dirt.
Okay.
So we'd have to look at the particulars of the HAVA grant and say, can we backfill what we already spent?
Yeah.
And those are questions that Secretary of State's office can help us answer. We can look at the grant ourselves. and
I would look
at
into that, just, okay.
Hey.
I'm just saying, if we buy it and then we get the grant and we find out that we can't, then we gotta send it back. Then I think we should get together and make a decision whether to wait to get it. If that there is a window that it takes to get that grant instead of spending our money. That's my opinion.
I always like spending other people's money. It's my favorite.
Yeah,
way to do
exactly,
things.
yeah.
So if we go
That's my
lunch,
point.
you'll know who's picking up the check. not me.
Okay, I think we're clear.
I'm gonna move to this very quickly. I will sit down with you, Supervisor Warren, and go through this and how we arrive at this. But our tier 1 projects, we are in the process of many of them. We're nearing the finish line on a couple of them. Some of them aren't our money, like the airport projects. There's either a small match or no match at all. But we move at the snail's pace of the Department of Transportation. The election equipment replacement, jail roof replacement, I would suggest that we add to our capital projects plan. The rest we are still working on, and I'm going to focus primarily on these here because those are the ones that we are working on directly. And that's the fairgrounds, the Loma Linda ball field and park amenities. Park amenities and ball field have become kind of one. Right now, we've got a lot of the amenities covered. We literally covered. And then the ball field, we've moved dirt from the fairgrounds to the Loma Linda ball field. And that if it's not done today, it'll be done tomorrow that we've got it. We will rough smooth it. And we've got a contractor who will come up and do it for a minimal price to flat level it. Once that's done, we will then assemble the fencing. And then we will go out to bid for a contractor to install the irrigation system. We will likely not plant until nighttime temperatures are consistently above 60 degrees for Bermuda grass. Acquiring the state land, you heard an extensive, and you already recognize that a lot of what Mr. Fowler covered today, we have also covered. We're familiar with it. Some of the stuff that he raised, we had not considered, but it raises layers of where do we spend our money and when? He talked about Pierce Coleman a lot. He's very familiar with them. They're not the only people in the state who do this kind of work. Pierce Coleman's a reputable firm. They do good work. But do we want to hire an attorney before we even buy the land? No. Do we want to hire, an architect to design the infrastructure? We've kind of soft settled on, we will bring the property up to acquisition, but not acquire. We don't have that answer hard and fast, but that's what we've been towing towards. All of that enters into the decision of when and how and at what pace we go forward. One thing that he is not aware of, and that is that we don't have an acreage decided on. And I have struggled. At one moment I'll say, let's do 40 and be safe. And then the next moment I'll say, let's do that kind of thing that Reed outlined. It's about 115, 117 acres. And then sometimes let's go big. And that can vacillate just like tariff news. I'm not sure on which moment you ask me what I think. We are in the process of gathering information that will help us make that decision. We've already had some good meetings that we will cover with you later. And we have another meeting scheduled that will be very helpful to us as well. But with that, that'll stay on our radar so that we can begin that acquisition process at any point we feel comfortable moving forward. Our tier 2 projects, of course, are very small at the moment. The horse stalls here, excuse me. The horse stalls, for some reason my cursor is not working there. And item number 13 will be rolled into the fairgrounds project. We've demolished some of the old stalls and we will replace them with much lower cost prefab stalls that are they're not permanent, but they are not meant to be moved every day. So that'll roll into the fairgrounds project. There's some other projects there that, again, we can wait on. Reed and David, for example, are still looking for an acceptable materials pit area that doesn't interfere with solar projects. And we've got some other things going there, but given the uncertainty, I think we ought to stick with our current classification. Now, I will give these sheets to each of you, send them to you. If you direct us to shift things, move things, we can do that too. But our recommendation was, other than elections and a jail roof, we more or less stick to the plan. So with that, that's all I have for our budget work session. Like I said, I want you to be thinking about the capital stuff. You've given us enough direction. Renee has pretty much flushed out most of the budget. We need to do, there's some finer adjustments. We need to look at some positions, which Austin and Renee and I will all look at together. Without certainly any questions. And I appreciate it. This has been a long meeting. And I apologize for its length.
Thank you for getting it all together.
I don't have any further questions. It's pretty clear. You?
No,
Will?
sir.
You?
Nope.
John? Okay. All right. Now I can say this meeting's adjourned.